No, just I sent you that email a while ago about Papa Roofing, and you mentioned Lynch, but you know, if there anybody else you might.
Sorry, totally
That's okay.
blanked on that.
Where are the children's?
Let me see if I can find it.
Your house. I think your house.
My, send me a little reminder.
Okay.
You don't want.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for hurting cats. Sorry about that.
Is Ron coming? Roger is sick. Do we know if he's coming, joining by Zoom?
He said no. He said no, not at all.
We don't know. Unless you're planning on bailing and taking
The
someone with you.
original name of the house.
The what?
I think it was the shepherd.
Not yet.
You know, like,
What'd you say?
I said unless he's
I don't
gonna bail and take
know
someone
that
with
Bill
him.
has like a website, an old website that he posts that has
Hopefully
the name
not.
of every house that was one of the original Bill manager houses. It was
Just,
named after
oh. I was like, why was your computer just moving on its own?
as the like, I mean, it was built in 1912, like the original. So it could have been.
So you were you looking up?
Are we waiting for Jeff at this point, or? Oh, so Ron's not here? Did he say he wasn't gonna be here? Anybody hear anything from Ron?
Thought he said he was.
I didn't see a reply from him.
Does he know it's a Wednesday meeting?
How could he miss all the emails?
But it was like, to use the census and then use the city directory. No.
All right. All right, Jeff.
FFA.
Get Jeff talking about old houses.
Never get him.
Is there anything you wanted to get going with?
That's a loaded question. I don't have anything. I know I shared with you all kind of a cheat sheet on the motions, and that way you can read right from it instead of leafing through the staff reports. And the only note, and I'll make this one, the Stadium Road, we refer to it as a property in the motion, and it should be referred to as this IPP. So that's the only thing that's in there. But I have nothing. I have things at the end, but we'll get to those.
Okay. Well, thank you for those of you here for being patient, and for those of you online. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. Staff will introduce each item, followed by the applicant's presentation, which should not exceed 10 minutes. I'll then ask for questions from the public, followed by questions from the BAR. After questions are closed, we'll then ask for comments from the public. And for each application, members of the public are each allowed 3 minutes to ask questions and 3 minutes to offer comments. Speakers, I ask you please to identify yourselves and provide your full address. And for everyone here, please remember to speak into your microphones. That's how those following along online can hear us. Comments should be limited to the BAR's purview, that is, regarding only the exterior aspects of the project. And following our discussion and prior to taking action, the applicant will have up to 3 minutes to respond. Before we get started this evening, I just have 2 brief announcements that I just think are important to the design community here. For those of you that are unaware, that tonight the City of Charlottesville is beginning the 3 open houses for the first module of the draft zoning code. The first one is later tonight at 6 p.m. at Charlottesville High School. The second is tomorrow night at Beaufort Middle School. And on Saturday, the final open house will be here at 11 a.m. at City Space. They're informal, and they give us a chance. I would encourage everyone here on the board and those of you following along to participate. These have big implications for our city and for the kinds of projects that will be coming before this board. Second, I wanted to share the unfortunate and unexpected news of the passing of Wayne Lawhorn. Most of us here in the design community know him just as Wayne, and for as long as I can remember, Wayne was the guy who was picking up drawings and delivering prints from T&N Printing. And for those of you that knew him, know that he always had an incredible smile, a generous spirit, and a kind heart. And he certainly helped us do our work better. And I don't think he knows the impact that he had on this community. He will be missed. And I'll just note a couple of things that there will be services for him this Sunday at 2 p.m. at Free Union Church of the Brethren. And TNN Linwood has mentioned that he does want to have a service for the design community perhaps sometimes later in April. So thank you for that time. The first item on the agenda is our matters from the public. That is for anything that is not on the agenda or that is listed on the consent agenda. Do we have anyone online or in person that has something they'd like to mention? Okay, we'll move on. The next item is the consent agenda. We have two items, one including the meeting minutes from April 19th, 2022, and second, COA application for 600 Lexington Avenue window installation. Do I hear a motion or any discussion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain just because of the minutes.
Thank you. The first item on for new items is 1516 East Market Street, Woolen Mills, a rear addition and porch.
I'll be right. Let me find the. I don't know how legible that is, and I think you may not even have to say anything. So that hopefully will crush this. But I'm not sure why I'm not zooming in. So this is a COA request within the Woolen Mills Conservation District. That's exactly what it'll look like. And it's an existing house that they'll be doing a rear addition and also changing the existing windows. The reason I didn't have this, and I don't know why the graphic looks so poor, but in your staff report, the house has on the second floor, the backs, a porch that was enclosed with siding. The addition, then they were looking to just continue that wall plane with the siding. And I know we like to see an addition read as an addition. So one idea was to turn a corner, but there's some structural things that there needs to be a beam there. So keeping the wall planes the same is important to the interior plan. So I had suggested one of or both of a solution would be to simply apply a flat board, like a corner there, and then continue the siding, the new siding, or you could even have the corner board and have the siding with them alter the face dimension. It's not I'm just curious what you all thought of that. If you think either or any of those are worthwhile, and wanted to give you that opportunity to chime in. So, but I know that the applicant is here if you had any questions, but I thought, like I said, this would have been consent agenda except for that one, that question.
Okay. Would the applicant like to say anything additionally?
Hello. I think Jeff did a good job explaining. Just to kind of clarify, the existing it's like this old vinyl siding that is kind of, we have like brick, and then above it is this very old vinyl siding. So we would match the material to the new build, and we would be using, I know we talked about the material, just like hardy plank, so it would be a very nice updated look. So hopefully it would be a seamless transition, but that white material vinyl is already there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Are there any questions from the public? I'll keep moving. Questions from the board? Comments from the public? Comments from the board?
I think the idea of adding a board to differentiate the two, the addition and the existing, is a sound idea.
I would approve it either way. I mean, the siding's gonna be all new. It's obvious that it's infill, it's new, but, yeah, but either way.
I don't have a problem with it as submitted. It's mostly because it's a historic conservation district and not an ADC.
I think that's a good distinction for us to make. Would someone like to make a motion? Our handy dandy motion cheat sheet.
This is East Market
I
Street.
will.
Time into that.
I will. Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including city design guidelines for historic conservation districts, I move to find that the proposed addition, porch, and window replacements at 1516 East Market Street satisfy the BAR's criteria and are compatible with this property and other properties in the Woollen Mills Village Historic Conservation Districts. And the BAR approves the application as submitted.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I made you come out tonight, but we are going to keep talking about the Hudsons and the Shepherds and figure that mystery out. Even if we find things, we don't want to tell people about, right?
I'll tell your father you did a good job here at his longstanding. This is the daughter of Wade Tremblay, a longstanding member of the BAR.
That's also our recruiting message.
Yeah, if you're interested, we're still looking for a last member, Mariel. No, I was talking about you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just to complete that public announcement, yes, we are you all are a 9-member board appointed by council, and one of the seats that remains vacant is the owner of a business or owner of a property located within design control districts. So, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. I don't know why the image came up so poorly, but let me just.
It was poor in the packet too, I noticed. Not the actual drawings, but just that first one.
All right.
Yeah.
And hey, Tom, I still see you you're all set. You're all approved. Okay. So next up is
Next up is 104 Stadium Road.
Fred, do you have anything you want me to plug in when you start, or you just call up I'll call up the submittal if you want, or.
Yeah, we don't have anything unless, if we go further on, if there's some interest, I think there might be somebody that
Fair enough.
can add to embellish, but
Okay, so this is a request for 104 Stadium Road. It is an individually protected property in the city, and an opportunity again to educate. The city has architectural design control districts, which are sort of the traditional historic districts. We have historic conservation districts, which are sort of a less rigid form of a design review, and we have individually protected properties, and there are 77 of them in the city, and IPPs are evaluated under the same ordinance and same guidelines as the ADC districts. And for full disclosure, I live in an IPP, so I'm quite familiar with the process. This is a request for demolition, a demolition COA for the 1927 structure located at 104 Stadium Road. It's a stone, described as an English Tudor Revival style residence. It was designated by City Council in 2011, so it's one of the more recently designated properties. The historic survey you all have seen, it was constructed by a gentleman who was an English professor at the university. There is a relationship to a gentleman who was a Secretary of State during World War II and under Franklin Roosevelt, and it was also the United States' first delegate to the United Nations. And that comes up in the survey, although while that's probably the most historically significant individual associated with this house, it doesn't, there's no evidence he lived there or things were done there that were historic. So while that's in there, it's his connection to it is not strong. The house is not listed on the National Register or the Virginia Landmarks Register. However, it is designated by the city again as an individually protected property, and as such, the Board of Architectural Review has purview over its demolition, over its alteration, or any new construction on the site. It's a unique building. I think there are one of the questions in the guidelines about other structures. They're certainly not rare. There are a couple examples within the Oakhurst Gildersleeve ADC district that are stone. A couple are of a similar design. So I think the other part I want to just be clear with the applicant and the folks and the public about is, so this is a request for the demolition of the building and of the sites. Actually, there are historic terraces and gardens, I think, associated with the property. If the demolition of the property or demolition of the structures is approved either by the BAR or through appeal or through unintentionally, the IPP designation remains in place. That is a zoning overlay district that only City Council can assign to a property or remove from a property. So, and we do have, in fact, have a property in the city that was an IPP. The structure was raised, but it remains an IPP. The property owner never went through the process of removing that designation. So just want to be clear about demolition is not an automatic elimination of that overlay. I know you all have asked me a little bit about the history of this transaction between the adjacent parcel, which the city sold to the owner. I can't really speak to it with any authority other than the fact is this property is an IPP, and how and in what manner it's associated with the adjacent parcel that's not an IPP isn't really what's before you here tonight. So, and if you've got questions about it, I can certainly do some research and come back to you with it, but I'm not here to discuss that tonight. And then the last piece I have is that I think like you all have done with projects on Market Street, reviewing demolitions and with the anticipation of future development. And there's a draft condition in the report. You all can certainly amend it, add to it, make it stronger, however you see fit. But I think a concern I have is that a historic structure is raised and for a project that never comes to fruition. So to in some way require, if you can, that that demolition's not going to just be immediately. It's going to have a connection to a project that's moving forward on the site. So with that, do you have any questions for me? All right.
There we go.
Sorry.
I do. I wonder, is there any information about this land, how it was used, the history of that parcel prior to the stone house?
The adjacent parcel?
No, the land that the house was on, or generally that piece of property.
Probably, but I don't have it offhand.
Okay.
More than likely, sorry.
You go, you know.
More than likely, it was probably part of the Montebello property, which was owned by John Perry, I believe, who was one of the contractors who actually helped build the university. But it was a plantation site. That'd be my guess without doing the actual research.
Yeah, that's fine. I just didn't see anything noted in the documentation.
I have a question. You're saying, Jeff, that there was another site, IPP, that was raised. Is that the only one that's been raised in the history? I mean, do we know how many of these have been taken down?
To my knowledge, that's the only one, and
That
that's, yeah, just below Burnley Moran there, where the food trucks line up.
Okay.
That was in 2014.
Okay, Mr. Welf, would you like to add anything?
Hey, Fred, hey, Tom, hey, Tom, you're still on, but your project was approved, so you're all set. All right. Thank you. All right, let me, I'm going to just bring up the images, Fred, and just in case we have something you want to refer to, and then.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you. My name is Fred Wolf, architect here in Charlottesville, and our firm is the associate architect working with ESG out of Minneapolis, and I believe on the call is Neil Reardon, who is the architect leading the project for them. Also with me are Dylan Lambert and Mitchell Corte, who are from Subtext in the back on the left. Subtext is the developer out of St. Louis that is pursuing this project. And then also with me is Mark McConnell, who is a historic architectural consultant. And for us, he came and looked at this property and furnished a report. He's done a lot of work with the Department of Historic Resources, a lot of tax credit projects, and is trained and practices specifically on historic buildings. So I want to quickly say thank you to everybody for their time and willingness to talk a little bit over the last several weeks as I introduced the project and what our application was going to look like. And I think that Jeff has done a good job in summarizing what was in the staff report and the application. The things that I'll quickly just remind us is that, when we went through this, one of the things that struck me was this property was volunteered to the city, and then that's an unusual event to have somebody volunteer, an owner volunteer property to be designated. Only 2 years earlier, the district was formed. There was an exhaustive survey done of the district. It cataloged many buildings throughout Oakhurst and Gildersleeve, including several on JPA and then some on Maywood and Valley Road. And there are actually 2 structures directly across the street from this that are part of that district. And there was a 39-page report that excludes any mention of this building when it was establishing that. So I think that's curious. They are very specific in their nomination report describing how they set up the district and defined what properties they captured and included. And so that to me is one of those fundamental things that I think is interesting. The fact that this 2 years later somehow became an asset that rose to the level to be included. Anyways, so just going through this here. I guess in our opinion that this is, it's curious, I think, that this was omitted the first time and then was included subsequently. Having been on the BAR and having nominated buildings for IPPs, it seems to me that, an individually protected property is usually something that is reserved for a building or a property that is in some ways special or rare, exceptional, and different than defining a boundary for a district that captures lots of things, some of which are contributing more or less to the district. And, as we look at this and if we went through the criteria, I think that our determination was we have a really nice old building, but there is no aspect about it that's really particularly unique or exceptional or rare or could not be replaced. We found no evidence of anything that is exceptional in terms of its, the folks who have been associated with designing or constructing it, or anybody who has lived there that had any historic associations. Jeff rightly mentions one individual who had an association with somebody who lived there at one point, but that could be said of a lot of places in Charlottesville. As could the fact that we have many beautiful old homes in Charlottesville that are not individually protected properties, which have, valuable architectural qualities. The other point that I think is critical to look at is that this house is, at this point, kind of an island unto itself. The structure has been, for all intents and purposes, sort of severed from whatever original context or streetscape, whatever fabric, urban fabric it might have been a part of when it was originally constructed. It sits in a position where it's surrounded by mid-century buildings that are multifamily student housing, not of particular architectural value themselves. And uniquely, as was pointed out when we were meeting, the back of this house actually faces the front of what will be the site for this future development. So in the preservation of this, you would effectively have the back of the house facing the front door, or the front facing the front of what potentially could be the development that comes later. I think that the group sees an opportunity here, when you look at the density and growth desired, to take this series of parcels and hopefully without this as an obstacle or hurdle in the way, to be able to develop an urban campus precinct at the point where the city can absorb some growth and density and use that growth and density for student housing to take pressure off of other adjacent neighborhoods where you want to try and preserve and save single-family dwellings, like in Oakhurst Circle and Gildersleeve. So I'm going to hand this off to our historic preservation consultant, and then at the end of that, I think that the owners would like to say a few words as well. So thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mark McConnell. I'm a preservation architect, and found myself in a kind of unusual position for a preservation architect, being asked to evaluate a building for potential removal. And when they first called me, I called John Burns, the Chief Appeals Officer for the National Park Service. He's sort of the last word in preservation for the United States, and I called him on the eve, literally, the eve of his retirement, and I asked him for advice. And I said, is there a precedent for this? Is there, criteria? Is there some way to do it? And he's very official, and he said the National Park Service takes no position with regard to demolition of historic buildings unless they're in the tax credit program in Section 106. So he, and then he said, and there are no precedents in the National Park Service and Preservation and the State Historic Preservation Office. What goes on one historic property has zero bearing on what happens on the next historic property that comes along, because they all have to be considered individually, and that's how John advised me to consider this building. And I'm sure you've all read what I wrote in this report. It's a nice it's a, you know, it's just a really nice English Tudor style cottage. It has been marooned in its environment. There's no context for it. And as Fred said, it was, you know, I would use the term, myself and my colleagues have created probably 24 National Historic Register districts. And so when I say this building was excluded, I really do mean it was excluded, because we have, in times past, reached out, you know, well beyond the borders of what is a well-defined district to include buildings we thought were worthy. And this is, you know, there are 9 buildings of the Tudor Revival style in the district across the street. There are 8 stone buildings, you know, in the district across the street. So it is not in a National Register district, and I think on purpose. There's nothing particularly unique about it. The McLeod family built a house and had a visitor, but there's a pretty stringent standard for association at the National Park Service when considering a historic building. So if, for example, there's a farm that I did the National Register nomination for in Vermont, where President Eisenhower wrote his memoirs and his history of World War II and all this stuff. But he lived there on the farm. He wrote these books. He received dignitaries, presidents, and so forth. So it barely qualified, and we just don't have that strong association here. So as I looked at the criteria for inclusion in the National Register, which is what would, you know, sway me to say, no, you know, this is a really important building, this one did not meet any of the 4. And to your question about what was here before, it was a vacant lot. I included the 1920 Sanborn map has the lot empty, and here are copies. I included the wrong map in my report. This is the 1929, and you can see the house in its residential lot setup here. So it was anticipated to be part of a neighborhood of residential houses. So, as you know, if you have any questions about the report that I put together, it's a nice building. It's not unique. It wasn't designed by a recognized master. It has been altered somewhat on the inside. I know you guys don't consider much the inside, but it is a marooned example of just a nice old house. So I advised the owner that it could be documented and removed without a significant impact to the historic community here in Charlottesville. And if there are any questions, do you ask me questions now, or do I?
We'll go through questions from the public first, and then
Okay.
the board.
And I'd like to give the owners just a couple seconds. I don't know
Sure.
what that means, but if I could give the
Well,
owners a few minutes.
If you could be brief, we usually. Yep. And
Good evening. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all today. My name is Dylan Lambert, Development Manager at Subtext. Our firm develops institutional quality multifamily and student housing, focusing on high quality design in urban and pedestrian locations. We believe that this is a phenomenal location and has the potential to be a prominent part of the entrance corridor, while also furthering the goals of the citywide comprehensive plan as well as the new zoning ordinance. While we haven't started formal design yet, we have spent a considerable amount of time working on visioning and precedent imagery. An architect who's on Zoom has a brief slideshow he'd be happy to share if you'd like. And just before I wrap up here, I just wanted to say that we would agree with some of the conditions that Jeff had mentioned in his report if demolition were approved, such as fully documenting the structure prior to demolition and it being contingent on approved permits for a future project. Our intent is not to tear this down unless that moves forward.
Okay.
And we're here for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll see where the questions and conversation takes us. Do we have any questions from the public, either here in the building or online? And I'll proceed with questions from the board. Just let me know, Remy, if anyone raises their hand. Any questions from the board? Just make sure you speak in your mic.
Yep. So this map's helpful, thank you. I guess I'm kind of curious, looking at this, and then also, like, in the staff report, Jeff included the 1950 Sanborn, which really only shows a minimal amount of growth, particularly only one house on the other side of, I guess, what's now Woodrow Street, or, so I guess I'm just kind of curious if that neighborhood was ever really built out. You know, we've kind of talked that it got marooned, but it almost seems like it's always been one of a handful, as opposed to really, there was a neighborhood there and they tore a bunch down to build the Woodrow Apartments, because it seems like the Woodrow Apartments are the first things there.
You're absolutely right. It's really been more marooned by the speed of the traffic, by the sort of predictable improvement of those roads that make it pretty darn hazardous to come out of the back door, which we think is the front of the house right now. So the sense of isolation that the house has a little bit more to do with the size of the roads around it than it does the fact that maybe there were a bunch of other little houses,
Right.
as opposed to across JPA where there was a real identifiable neighborhood.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I wonder if, well, no, I'm going to reserve that question.
Is David trying to
My turn.
gather thoughts, or?
Nope.
No other questions? Okay, we'll move to comments from the public. Do we have any comments from the public, either here in person or online? Comments from the board?
I can offer some confusion.
Some confusion?
Yes.
Please go forward.
All right. Yeah. No, it's, I find this confusing, and I apologize, because I did meet with Fred Wolf beforehand, and I feel like I was encouraging for this application, and now I don't feel quite as encouraged. It's, if this were part of a historic district, so if it was just a contributing structure in a historic district, I feel like it would not be such a easy decision to say, oh, it's not worth anything, and just, demolish it. I feel like we would actually, it would have a very low likelihood of being allowed to be demolished, if it were just existing again in a part of a district as opposed to being an IPP. And it's almost like we're being asked to decide, is this worthy of being an individually protected property, which, as Jeff has said, is not something that we, whether we allow the demolition or not, I guess by zoning, it stays as an IPP, which is also a little confusing, because I feel like if we allow the demolition, the house comes down, it's, the applicant could make a pretty easy legal argument saying, well, there's nothing there that's protectable, so why is this still a protected property? Where I'm really stuck, the history of this seems like a very deliberate decision by council. It was part of a sale deal, an agreement between the owners and council to purchase an adjacent property. And it took 2 meetings of a little bit of haggling to come up with this. An equal offer was denied, or not denied, but was turned down because, for this one. It was an offer to put to put a little apartment building on that corner lot that is now supposed to be left undeveloped. So I guess it just feels like to vote for denial would be to be overturning something that was very deliberately done by city council. Of course, that was the city council from 12 years ago. So this is why it's
Right. Well, I'll
very confusing
add
to
to
me.
that, because I do, I think in our review criteria for demolition, number 3 is the public purpose or interest in land or buildings to be protected. And what you're saying, Carl, to me, says if there's any record of what the public interest in this land or this building is, then that city council decision is pretty strong. Their elected body that chose to make that designation, and we're not here to debate whether it should or should not be an IPP, but that's the last record we have, that there was actually a public body that really felt strongly that it should be standing and that the land next to it should not be developed. To me, that's, at least in terms of the purview of our work, that would be for city council to decide. If they do no longer agree with that, not us, but
Right.
that's my
That's kind
thought.
of where I'm falling. Or that's my struggle.
And I know, just to further on that, I don't want to belabor it, but, and I do thank you for the report about the criteria for the historic designation. But I will note that there are some slight differences between our guidelines for considering demolition. They are not necessarily one-to-one with the eligibility for the National Register.
I'll just add to the confusion and hate to do it, but for me, it's just a pretty basic, at a pretty basic level, like, you know, for whatever reason, something has become an IPP, if it is that, then it is that. And there should be some power behind that, right? I mean, we're not saying we're knocking everything down. Obviously, there's one precedent for having knocked something down in the past. But for me, it's the precedent of the matter. It's what is this? How does this alter things moving forward? Whether it's, the processes through city council of why something came to be, or whether it's a historic purpose or context. That's my struggle with this.
When we talk about the precedent, are we talking about Riverview? The property that, Jeff, am I right?
Yes.
I was actually involved in that, and the BAR did not vote to demolish it. Just to make clear, it was not approved, it was not the applicant, I represented them in a legal capacity, appealed to council, and then they ended up putting it up for sale, and they were able to demolish it through the statute. But it was not this, as far as I know, am I correct that we're saying that the BAR has never approved demolition of an IPP in the city, as far as we know?
To my knowledge,
Okay.
no.
So this is a significant application for us, you can imagine. And adding to the quandary is how recently it was made an IPP as a legislative action of basically council, which delegates their power to us. So it is confusing. And I just wonder, if we deferred and kicked this up to council, couldn't council by action un-PP this, undesignate it, which would allow the applicant to do anything they want? I mean, I'm not unafraid to act, but because I think what is troublesome is that council so recently decided, probably when Mr. Wolf was on the BAR, decided that this was an IPP, not his fault. I mean, he's not acting contradictory to that. The BAR does not decide what IPPs are. It's done by legislative action of the highest body in the city. And I just wonder if we deferred on this, you might have a clearer path with city council, frankly.
You mean if we denied it?
Well,
Or-
or we deferred. I
And
mean,
wouldn't they have to come back to
Defer,
us?
they come back to us next month.
but couldn't they go to council? I mean, it just,
So there are a lot of steps, and I said we can, certainly Fred and his team
I
can.
mean, if it's council's desire to see this developer do this kind of project too, both, in this location, because we want density and that's where, you know, the new zoning ordinance is going, I would almost rather have them undesignated.
I think, and Fred, jump in, some of that is,
Seems
it's
like a-
the sequence of things that have to happen, and, I mean, I'm almost think of it in terms of like a large-scale project when it's coming to BAR, and how many steps forward do you go? There are a lot of things associated with this project that would go into those next steps for zoning and things like that. So that my understanding is that this clears a hurdle, then allows sort of that comfort moving forward, if you will. Probably not the right word, but that there will be more involved in what has to go to council than just the removal of the overlay. So, I think I want to just, if I can throw something at, I was, with Carl, I kind of, you had a good question, Breck, and Carl asked about, or maybe, I'm sorry, James, so in the map that we just got, I couldn't figure out why,
What I just asked you.
yeah, why that was there, because it, and so this is these are the 1950, 51 annotated 1929 maps. So just to kind of, so clearly, JPA was kind of aligned over here. And so this house that you see right there is what's shaded in on this.
But there's 4 parcels on this map, and there's 4 parcels on that map.
Yeah.
Something is not adding up.
All I can discern is that the right-of-way was changed. That's how it became a city parcel. I don't know, but it's really
This
been
lot is
kind of.
exactly the same.
And I
So
can
maybe-
also offer this, these are Sanborn Fire Insurance maps.
Yep.
They were done by a fire insurance company, not
Right.
a survey.
Right.
So, but from what we could tell, the 20 and the 25 and 29, that they realigned JPA.
That seems to be it.
So,
So
do we think that maybe it got narrower when they removed the trolley car?
I don't know. I can't say that. I just wanted to just kind of get at what was it, what was there, and
These two lots are exactly the same.
Yeah,
I think
there's
his point,
something's
I
been
agree,
misdrawn.
but I think his point's well taken.
Well-
that this is not a surveyed map.
oh, no, Sanborn maps, you know something was there. You just don't know if it was exactly there and exactly that size, but at least it was there. So, sorry, just wanted to, while I saw the head scratching going on. So as far as procedurally, I think,
Interesting, kind of separate parcel, but again, that's Sanborn tax parcel map.
the best way to approach it is, as you did with other requests, is evaluate this on its face, and as to its historic nature or historic character, I agree. From the National Register criteria, there's a reasonable argument about its eligibility, other than its age. But it was designated an IPP by the city of Charlottesville, and for a reason. And I don't think there's many famous people associated with my house, and I can certainly tell you it was not a craftsman or a great architect. It was more like something we'd build when we were kids building tree forts, but it's an IPP. So I just to say, if there's a lot of structures that are designated IPPs for reasons that are of importance to the community. And so I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, but that's the question before you. What then city council does next in this is a series of steps for the applicant to decide. If you all approve this, those steps are still there for them. Like he was mentioned, this is with an entrance corridor also. So if you deny this request, that can be appealed to council, as happened last night, with council overturning a denial of a COA. As far as deferring, I'm not sure if there's if there are questions, it would be, we could further research about this site, this building. We can certainly do that, but I'd say if you're going to defer it, sort of be very clear on what the objective is in that deferral. So sorry to interrupt, but if that's helpful.
I guess, I'm not very confused. It's an individually protected property. We're charged by city council to protect this property. And I think it's pretty clear that we should vote to deny this application. I think the applicant's made a good case on all the points we've talked about. It's a very well put together presentation, which I really appreciate, but I think our purview is to protect individually protected properties. And then there are processes that can be followed to go through the course of actions to get to where they want to be, and we've done our job, and then they're doing their job, It's cut and dry to me, personally.
For the record, I'd just like to read through what the review criteria are, and not the city code, which is in our staff report, but there's a link to the criteria for demolition in our guidelines. And I'll pause after, and, people on the board can think yes or no,
And
whether they
both
meet
are in
it.
there- Both are in staff report, yeah.
The public necessity one, I didn't see that discussed.
It's on page 51.
I saw the
of
link
our-
inserted, Jeff, after the section 34-278 criteria, which I think everybody's focusing on, but let me just read them
But
down.
go ahead, I'm
So
sorry.
our criteria for demolition in the guidelines are section 34-278, all the ones that are in our staff report, that the applicant addressed, and then Jeff kind of did a rebuttal or response to. In addition, number 2 is the public necessity of the proposed demolition. I'm not going to debate it, I'm just going to say for whether there is a public necessity, not purpose, but necessity of the demolition. 3, the public purpose or interest in land or buildings to be protected. 4, whether or not a relocation of the structure would be a practical or preferable alternative to demolition. I haven't heard that discussed either. Whether or not the proposed demolition would adversely or potentially affect other historic buildings or the character of the historic district. There is none, so I think that's NA, it's not a historic district, it's not IPP. The reason for demolishing the structure and whether or not alternatives exist. And the last one is whether or not there's been a professional, economic, or structural feasibility study for rehabilitating or reusing the structure, or whether or not its findings support the proposed demolition. I don't know if that's your report, whether that would constitute that 7th, but I don't know professional, economic, and structural feasibility study. I don't think that's quite what your report was, but it probably went halfway there. So I would just encourage all of us to focus also on these criteria, some of which would augur one way and some which augur against, but public necessity of a proposed demolition has always been a big one. When, in my familiar before this board, if a badly needed road were needed to go through this front yard, then you could,
That's right.
or a cell tower where there was no service in the city of Charlottesville, or for a school, or for some public purpose, but public necessity is stronger than just even public purpose.
Sure.
You're correct in that it's not state or federally listed, so a state or federal action such as a road building or the FCC licensing a tower that would be considered. So
It
if
would
this
trump.
helps, just so that we're all, I think, clear more for the public record as anything. So on page 3 of the staff report, there's the city code provisions 34-278.
Yep.
And those are the provisions of the code, the standards for review of demolition. And then
At the bottom of page 6, you provide the link.
right, and then on page
Page 7, there's
7 starts, so within the guidelines are the
Thank
review
you.
criteria.
Didn't find
They're almost identical. But I included them both
I
here.
apologize, I had
No, that's
missed
okay.
these.
Just make sure that we're, because I think it answers the question. And so
For your, particularly about the public necessity, staff's response was demolition is not a public necessity. The building has not been condemned nor deemed unsafe. As far as the condition of the building, staff did not go in it. I will say, when you staple a sign on a property that says, building's being evaluated for demolition, I usually get a few phone calls. So surprised that the kids living in that house didn't call me, but maybe they did. But as far as the report presented in the applicant's submittal, I think that's addressing and thoroughly to the historic character insofar as evaluating the National Register guidelines. But as far as a structural report or anything like that, I can't report on that, and I have not seen that. So to those two specific questions that you asked. And the other thing, and it came up in a question from one of you earlier about the BARs, the way the ordinance is written, if a demolition of a contributing structure, the BAR must approve it in the sense that that's, to be allowed to do it requires BAR approval. There is a condition in there, however, that if it's, if the building inspector deems it unsafe, people shouldn't be in it or around it, then that elevates it out of your purview. So, but we're not dealing with that here, to my knowledge. So sorry, Ms. Lewis, I didn't mean, just
No,
wanted-
I'm so
that
glad to
helps.
find it in the report. I didn't find that the applicant addressed those. And in fact, the whole discussion about, are there alternatives? Is it not feasible to move this? Is it not feasible to incorporate it? I mean, I think when there are criteria, that it's incumbent on the applicant to address all of them, and I think only part of them, the code ones, were addressed, but not our guideline ones. And I still haven't heard any discussion about them here. We've been on this for a little while. Even from us, I mean, we're at comments now, so.
Well, my personal reading of our guidelines and of the project is this is a property that we are asked to protect, and it's worthy of protection. I think it is an interesting. You'd be surprised at how many people know of this house, and because of its distinctive character and its location, it is an oddball to be sure. But our city would be less if it were gone tomorrow. I do think that the city, it's beyond our purview. They may have other thoughts about the usefulness of this land and how it fits into larger planning goals, but that's not for us to debate. I think that if we do deny this this evening, I do think that we should identify a number of different things about that, about the preservation of this structure. For instance, that if it is allowed to be demolished by an overturning of a denial, that it should be contingent on a future COA approval. I think it should also include the other conditions that were mentioned in the staff report. I think there just need to be very, very clear, if that's the direction, that there are other steps that the city council might want to take if they do not, if they were to overturn, say, a denial from our board. But I'm not sure where everybody is sitting on this at the moment, and haven't heard yet from Tyler. How are you guys feeling?
To your point about it being contingent on an approval of a COA down the line, if council approved demolition after a denial from the BAR, wouldn't that be contingent on whether the IPP still exists? Whether it wouldn't, it doesn't seem to be part of, can we put that contingency on a further approval later down
I
the
would
line?
assume if we can put that contingency on a COA, then council could, because they would essentially be approving the COA of the demolition themselves.
So that would just matter on whether the IPP is still in place or not whether the structure is in place. Because the rest of.
I don't think it matters either way, because we've had that issue on other properties within a district, and we still put a contingency that that a building be approved before it's demolished. But I don't know.
I think
It's an interesting question,
I think
and
it's
it's,
different because this is just an individual standalone property where I don't know if, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but where I take from it is if council were to approve demolition of this, I don't see why it needs to continue to be a protected property. I think the house is what makes it special. I think it's a jewel in the rough. And if they decide to allow demolition, then I think they should remove the protected status of the property and let the landowner do what they want, personally,
Okay, maybe I'm
my opinion.
Maybe
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
construing two different things. I think we're in agreement that if demolition of the structure happens down the line, that it would not happen until a building permit is approved. I think we've kind of stated that. I was taking what you were saying to be that if demolition of the structure happens, that whatever gets built comes back to us for BAR approval, and I think that would only happen depending if the
Correct.
IPP is still in
Correct.
effect or not.
Correct. That's why I feel like we need to give, if it never comes back to us, we need to give council the recommendations they need to protect this structure accordingly until another project is approved.
and the
And-
point being, yeah, you just don't want to prematurely demolish this and then a project doesn't occur. But that's one for council and for city attorney to, I think you can phrase it a very good question for them, but should the IPP be removed, does then any BAR action, does it become moot? I don't know that. So the best advice I would give you is to state, in either direction, what you'd like the result to be, and if it goes to council, allow them the opportunity to phrase it correctly.
Is there anyone on the board that is leaning towards approval of the demolition as submitted? Okay, well, that's pretty clear.
Sorry, guys.
Fred, would you like to have a few moments? Is there any questions or?
I think we can see the tenor of this, and I appreciate the challenge, and it's not a clean-cut, clear decision. I did want to, if I could just speak to, I think in terms of moving or relocating it, it was looked at, and it's just determined that cost prohibitive to try and move a structure like this, particularly with the materiality of the stone walls and so forth, and even the notion of trying to disassemble and reconstruct it, cost prohibitive. So I think that option was looked at but taken away. And then the other thing with respect to the public necessity, I guess I meant to imply, and maybe should have been more specific, that the notion of being able to consolidate growth and development density in this one area and take pressure off of adjacent neighborhoods, to me, is a public necessity, that the growth and development of the university and subsequent need to house students and faculty and staff is critical. And if you can consolidate it by designing a new precinct instead of scattering it and allowing it to sort of leak out and impact multiple neighborhoods, then there's an enormous benefit there. And that's, I think, some of what's driving the new zoning that's being looked at. So, in our minds, that would be an aspect of the public necessity and public good of this project. It does not, it does not give you a peek into what happens after this, but I think that you could easily imagine if this is housing 4 tenants, and you could somehow gain, so 4 individuals can live in this little space on this parcel. If that number could go up, if you could gain 60, that would be a big gain in terms of being able to increased density, and you've got it right at the threshold between the neighborhood and the university, where it can really affect the university in a positive way and sort of keep its impact low in terms of the surrounding neighborhood. So,
Thank you. I appreciate
just-
that.
I'd just like to say that I think that makes really good sense. I mean, I get that as a public necessity. I think that's a good point. Is 60 the sort of number, the sort of differential that you're looking at?
I think, not knowing what the design is, it's just looking at the square footage and the acreage and what's there right now versus what you could
Yeah.
put on that amount, whatever the lot size is. That I think it was roughly 60 is what you would pick up in terms of occupants.
I do wonder, just, sorry, one more thing, and this is just me, I do wonder what looking at it in an alternative way, the sort of hybrid version, figuring out a clever way of integrating it into the development, what that gives, a much denser corner zone, but then also having that, that green space, that link to the past, that jewel, or, some sort of jewel in the rough. I don't know who came up with that, but having that integrated within it, how that might, in some ways, enhance the property. It's something
It's not in
that
the-
I'm curious about.
Yeah, I mean, for pontificating, I think it'd make a great coffee shop. Just gonna throw it out there. And have your apartment building around it.
May I offer a perspective, and I'm, again, trying to be fair to both sides here, because how you all discuss this will not be the last time you have a discussion like this. And this is a map of, and these are IPPs. And this large, very historic one is going on the market soon. There are, quite a few, mine doesn't show up on here because it's just a dot, but there are some IPP parcels that are substantial. We know from the discussion about Windhurst that it's more than just the four walls of the building. So I don't want to squelch the conversation, but I want to be aware that with whatever happens with the comp plan and the revised rezoning, this discussion is going to become more common. And I think I didn't wear my preservation hat as boldly as I should have last night, and maybe I need to wear it a little tighter today. And that is to say that, this is to be equating historic preservation with, well, gee, what are you building there?
Density, yeah.
That's a little troubling of a ledge to go out on. It's just my caution.
Right, and I think we also need to hold up to the city council and to our community that we are now, I think, building some really good examples of dense development in close proximity to historic homes, and I think some really good, successful examples. And we're better served for those efforts, even though they do make projects a little trickier sometimes. So I think I'm not sure if we're making any more progress on this one. So I think, do we have a motion or a direction?
Can I just ask one more question of Jeff? So if, I know it's not what this group necessarily wants to do, but, so if they wanted to get a zoning text amendment and get the IPP designation lifted, what does that process look like before council?
It's identical to,
To a rezoning, right?
yeah, I mean, what we went through with the
So
church.
do they go before the planning commission and then it gets
Goes
passed
to you
and then
all.
they have a hearing?
So remember, we just designated that 415 10th Street was designated an IPP last summer. And it went to the
What?
church, the Green Church.
Oh, but we did,
It
We
went-
voted to support it, but
Correct.
but it doesn't require action.
It only requires a recommendation of the BAR
Okay.
and of the
Okay.
Planning Commission.
Recommendation, yeah.
So so it's an entirely a decision by council.
So
They
to-
are
so to
required to seek your input,
Yes,
but
to undo an IPP designation,
it's just the same thing in reverse.
it would go to, I mean, maybe we would say we support it, maybe we wouldn't, because we tend to get ignored. We did last night before city council. That's part of what's weighing in on this and kind of the direction of, either us voting in favor of or voting against demolitions. With a new zone, I just have to, on my grandstand say, with a new zoning ordinance calling for a lot of density, and Mr. Wolf has served on this board before, what happens with these 77 individually designated historic properties? If anybody wants to knock them down, we have the density, ADU, historic, whatever, name the goal of the new zoning ordinance and our new comprehensive plan, and you get a demolition. And effectively, what does an IPP mean? What does history mean? What does preserving a historic fabric mean? And I think we're hesitating over this because we've got other ones here. I'm not saying we're holding your matter hostage, but I'm just proposing another way it could happen. That you could send a proposal to rezone this. You'd go before Planning Commission, go before council, and then the IPP designation's lifted, and you don't have to argue about any of the criteria for demolition in front of us. And it's, and not that we don't, not that, I mean, or we may vote, I'm not sure where everybody's standing, but if this group, you've heard several people vocalize that they would deny the demolition, then you appeal to council, and then you're spending more time. Seems like it would be a better idea because of our confusion over why this was designated a mere decade ago.
As clarification, if we pursued having the designation removed by rezoning, wouldn't that then have to come back in front of you all for approval or
No.
recommendation?
No.
Just simply a recommendation. It's not binding.
Not an
Yeah.
approval, a recommendation.
Mhm.
It still would be a review.
Mhm.
Yes.
I mean,
But
yeah.
then we would either recommend or not, and then it would go on to council,
Would you
right?
find yourselves in the same position you're in now?
Maybe, but I would say that none of our powers originate with us. They're all delegated from council. So you always have an appeal to council, and we found out, I'm just saying it kind of, my suggestion goes to the core of what's wrong and why people are having some heartburn over this evening. Sure.
Because I want to point to the microphone to sort of get this on the record.
Yeah.
I've been in this position a lot, and in your position a lot. And the reason I think that we're here, and the reason that you're there, is because not all buildings are created equal. Not all IPPs have the same character or quality or historic importance as another. And it's your judgment, that's why you're here, I think, to say, well, here's just take any of these other IPPs. Oh my gosh, we don't care what the density is. This is Thomas Jefferson slept here, whatever. Whereas another building that got nominated for an IPP came a different route and maybe is not that important. I think that's why you're here. That's a public trust to you guys is to evaluate each of these criteria on each of these buildings on their own merits. That's why the National Park Service does not accept precedent, because each building has its own set of qualities.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that if you're concerned about you're going to be running into this again and again, yes, you are, but not all buildings are created equal. So every person that comes up here and says, oh, this building that was built by the Masons that built Monticello is super duper important. No. But maybe a building like this one that has less of the defining characteristics for a National Register nomination, for example, is not as important. That's sort of your trust, and that's why you're here. I think not just to say, oh well, it's in the National Register district, forget it. I think you have that ability, and I've been here and been there and seen it. And that's why we're human beings and we judge these things.
Right.
Anyway.
I think Mark's saying,
I-
what same thing I'm saying is, the guidelines give you the criteria, and that's all I was saying. It's just, we have the criteria to make that evaluation. They are essentially the same as saying, should it be an IPP or not? But, so it's stick with these, stay within these, and my only caution about bringing in, gee, what's gonna happen here is that strays from this list of things that you all have, and I think, so the IPP, whether a COA for approval is COA for demolition is approved or not, the IPP fee is still out there. And yeah, there's merit to what you're saying. You should, just go to the IPP, and then this all becomes moot. But this process is here. I think they're looking for a decision, and if you're uncomfortable with the demolition, then follow your criteria and make a vote on that. And then whatever has to happen next with the rezoning for the overlay district, that happens down the road.
Does anybody want to venture a motion? Well, maybe first I'll just put it to Fred. Would you like us to proceed with a vote on this, or would you like to request a deferral?
No, I think we'd like to have an action taken on it, and I think that Mark said something important. And I think that's I think a big part of this is not necessarily that we believe that individually protected properties should all be at risk. I think that what we're questioning here is whether this property really warranted or should be, and we weren't there, or some of us maybe were there. But no, I'm pointing to myself. But warranted that designation, and when you look at it in the big picture of the other things that might bring it or allow it to rise to that level. So, we have not made, and intentionally, we never made the argument that this isn't a sound or stable building. It's not structurally falling down. It's really about the quality and character of the architecture and its asset, and whether or not it's valuable at that level. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion. Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the BAR's design guidelines and the standards for considering demolitions, I move to find that the proposed demolition of the house and gardens at 104 Stadium Road does not satisfy or the BAR's criteria and guidelines and is not compatible with this IPP, and for the following reasons, the BAR denies the application as submitted.
We need to list some reasons.
I think the reasons were in the first part, but if we need to be more specific. Do I hear a second
just-
for conversation?
I guess the way that you read the motion, it says for the following reasons.
Yep.
Which,
Do we have a second so we can discuss?
second.
Okay.
Can I
Discussion.
ask, can you clarify, so we're assuming I'm drafting up a response to an appeal. And I don't know, the other night, the planning commission took, I think, 40 minutes to come up with the motion. That was a good one to unravel. But this relatively simple, but if the grammar may not be right in this, but if you want to amend it that for the following reasons, or that for the reasons stated, or I think that would be helpful, or remove the word following.
Sure. Yeah.
We need to have some reasons if this is gonna go to council. So
Well-
the house it's almost 100 years old. while not being the only stone house in Charlottesville, is a fairly rare example of a housing type in Charlottesville. That is also that is part of that time period when it was built. That's when most of the stone houses were built. It is clearly creates the character of that space where it exists.
It's an IPP?
Well, but that.
I think that's, we gotta note that.
And we've never
Okay.
voted to demolish an IPP?
It has a unique remnants of a historic landscape.
That is,
I'm sorry, unique.
Remnants of a historic landscape. I can't remember the.
Unique remnant and historic landscape.
it is in good condition with
Yes.
no reason for demolition pertaining to its condition.
I would also add, our review criteria for demolition number 3 is the public purpose or interest in land or buildings to be protected. The last record that we have that would speak to that is the designation of the property itself by City Council in 2011. There was clearly a desire for this building and the adjacent property to be protected.
And the wording in that resolution is also that the adjacent parcel not be developed specifically.
Just an add-on to the landscape, I would say that the historic landscape contributes significantly to the context of JPA, or it influences, the landscape, and it could significantly influence the landscape, or the effect of the buffer between JPA and the built lots. I'm sure you can say that.
And as to guidelines 6 and 7, that we're inclined to believe that alternatives do exist to demolition in this case, and that rehabilitation or reusing the structure is possible.
I would like to add several recommendations for City Council if they should choose to overturn this denial. And one is that the building should be documented thoroughly through photographs and for and measured drawings according to the Historic American Building Survey standards. Information should be retained by City of Charlottesville, Department of Neighborhood Development Services, and Virginia Department of Historic Resources. The COA for demolition of this building be contingent on BAR approval of the building's replacement if it remains an IPP, or approval of the building by the Planning Commission if it is an entrance corridor project, to ensure that the building is not unnecessarily demolished if the project does not move forward.
I don't want to include that.
I think we should say that a demo permit is contingent upon a building permit, rather than it being something that comes back under BAR purview.
So delete the second bullet that was suggested in the staff report? Is that what we're saying?
What's your problem with it, Carl?
It just, so, if they wanted to put a parking lot there and it's an IPP, we'd still have to approve it.
It may not
I
ever
don't
come
know that-
back to us.
I don't think that we can actually do that. That's my problem, is I know we've been trying to do this with our motions recently, and I still, if something's worthy of demolition, it's worthy of demolition, regardless of what happens next. That's my own, I think that's how we're supposed to be reviewing this. So I
But it
understand
could
all
be
this other
demolished
shit, but-
next
But
week.
that means it could be, if we voted, if council
The
voted.
motion is to deny demolition.
Right, but Breck is saying that if council, approves demolition, we recommend that it's only contingent on, like you said.
A building permit.
Or we've made this motion with other demolition approvals where it's, contingent on BAR approval of the new building. And that, it's not really a demolition approval. I mean, that's, and it also, it takes away the value of even approving a demolition.
Well, I just note that the applicant was okay with that condition coming in.
Okay. I'm okay.
I'm not troubled by it because I don't think it's asking us to look at what's going to replace the demolition. And we're saying, of course, if this is all part of our motion, which has been quite long, but I'm okay with it because I think that it shouldn't be demolished until we know that the new structure is going forward. I mean, we're talking about Vinegar Hill, folks. I mean, let's be real. We had an entire neighborhood that was demolished under the guise of public purpose, and nothing sits there but a Staples store, I'm sorry, and a few other minor businesses, and that was it. We should all permanently be ashamed of that, and I have no problem with that condition, and council should neither, given the history of the city.
I'm gonna back down, but I do not see the equivalency in that argument. I'm done discussing, I'm sorry.
So, just a question of order, the motion that you made and then was seconded, and then are we asking that all of the justifications be included in our motion that we're voting on?
I think so.
Then council would have to read through those, correct?
Yes.
I just want to make sure for the record that.
And those
that
are not,
that's-
Well, that's
yeah.
why I brought
Correct.
it up,
Right.
because he said for the following reasons, and
they're
therefore we
not
need
conditions
following reasons.
of approval.
Right, no,
They
they're
are-
justifications and
Correct.
what we're basing
Now-
our decision on.
And then
And I think that's important.
Mr. Gastinger's recommendations were suggestions to council to consider. And I think, it might be, I think I can gather from the discussion, what was said. It would be up to council to put that into whatever language they chose,
Right,
so.
we can't,
But it would show up in their packet.
right, that's the purpose of it.
We didn't do that the last time, correct? With the one that.
Which last time?
The one that was overturned last night. We didn't put any conditions on that. Or we didn't put any reasons.
That was a misstep on my part.
I think
It's not your fault. I think we had discussed whether
It was
it,
at some
Right.
meetings.
it should be documented,
Yeah.
and it just, council didn't do
So-
that.
I don't know if this question's good now or later, but seeing as we're rather verbose in our discussions and have numerous justifications that were listed. However, it usually takes close to a year till we see the meeting minutes. Is there a way for us to see this motion before next?
Well, our
city
actions
council?
come out pretty fast.
They do, I guess that's what I'm.
This
hoping
would need to be listed in the action, is what we're saying.
That's what I'm getting at, is if we could see that and make sure
So
we sign off on it.
Yeah.
you give me a good opening to something that I had to make clear. And also, Ms. Lewis, that reference to Vinegar Hill brought it crystallized it in my head a way I hadn't heard it expressed before. I appreciate that. Thank you. An action that is appealable to council. There are 10 following the action by the Board of Architectural Review or the Entrance Court or Review Board. Anybody has 10 calendar days, 10 working days to appeal that decision to council. And only after that 10 days has lapsed without an appeal is it an actual COA. Now, in this case, you all aren't, it's not a COA, it's a denial of a COA. But I would say that, so one of the reasons we try to get things out the next day, it's not always the easiest thing to do, but is to make sure the applicant, even if something is approved, may say, as with JPA, there may have been a condition they didn't particularly like once they, kind of thought about it. They have the right of appeal. So it's incumbent on Molly and I to get this pulled together I can certainly circulate it tomorrow, but what I normally will do, situation like this, because again, these aren't conditions other than the ones addressing we're being specific to council, is I'll listen. You all have seen. I'll add parentheses if necessary or a note of clarification. But and then I can circulate it, but it will really come from watching the video and what you all said. And if something just doesn't fit, I can, or didn't pick up, I can ask you all about it. So so I'm comfortable with what you've said. If you want to sort of be more precise about the recommendations to council, that would maybe be the only thing, or at least be clear. But because there was a point, Carl, you asked a question, what of those comments to council do you want me to keep and not keep? But all the other things that you've discussed, I'll get from the table.
Okay. So I guess, what Breck said with Tyler's change, I think makes more sense.
A building permit.
Yes.
And what, Breck, I heard you were, relative to documentation, you were more reading from what's in the guidelines.
Correct.
Right, then, yeah.
Right. And were you okay with the other, since you made the initial motion, you're okay with those additions?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll call the vote. Mr. Timmerman?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Aye.
Ms. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Whitney?
Aye.
And I vote aye on the denial as well. Thank you for the conversation and for all the work that went into this, and it's a tricky conversation.
We should note that, as Mr. Warner said, you have 10 days, business days to appeal to council. It has to just be a notice to council and to the clerk.
So there is
Tina Thomas.
it is an application, is a $125 fee. You don't necessarily have to fill out the application, but a letter, you can send it through me, and I'll file it with the clerk. And the recommendation is that letter assume that it will stand alone as your request to council. In an appeal, staff, I have 10 minutes to summarize the project to council. The applicant or the appellant then has 10 minutes to speak. It's not a trial. You can have 100 people speak, or you can have one person speak, but you get 10 minutes. And then the BAR chair is allowed a few minutes of summary at the end. As occurred last night, there was some questions and discussion, but it's not a public hearing. And so I would say, yes, make a decision. 10 working days, probably, you can do the math on it. And but if you intend to appeal, let me know, and I can get that, at least be aware that something's coming. There is no timeline on which council must respond to an appeal. There's no statutory requirement. I've been trying to get them through. I've only had a couple in my 5 years, but we've had a couple more in the last couple weeks. Try to get them to council quickly, but it is up to council and when they prepare their agenda. So
It's
just
it's City
be in
Code.
touch with me.
City Code 34286. It's not a very long section.
Included in the staff report, so.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you all for your patience with that discussion. The next item on our agenda is 214 West Water Street. Preliminary discussion.
All right. And I'm going to clear the deck here on the screen. This is just a preliminary discussion that the applicant requested. It's sort of at this point kind of an idea they want to explore, and they had shared some images and drawings earlier. It's probably easier for you to just look on your screen. I emailed them, and So I think this is not as with any preliminary discussion, the goal is for the applicant to get answers from you all on what they have, and at the other side is to, from the BAR's perspective, advise them on what information you would want to see for a complete application. So there's nothing binding here. You're not voting on anything. If you say that looks really great, that doesn't mean you're approving it. This is just a preliminary discussion. Have at it.
Derek Euler with Euler and Company. Apologize for the preliminary nature of it. It's very. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So the plans that you have are the existing building. We haven't done any overlays. We actually just recently got those, not in time to do a lot. But essentially what we're trying to do is gain a little more space on the third floor of the structure. The easiest view is the section view in the plan to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at doing. And is there a way to get it up on the large
Yeah,
screen?
I'm
Also? That might be
trying to
easier.
find where I saved it.
Gotcha. I have the hard copy too, if it helps anyone. But
Is that what came in late?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was. Yeah, I apologize for that. We just got our hands on it.
Do you want me to email it to you, Joe?
No, I have it here. It's just too many windows open, that's all.
So it has, on the third floor, it has a curved roof section and then a large flat roof that is a walkout right now. What we're intending is essentially closing in most of the space on that flat roof with most likely just a flat roof above that. If you could scroll to that page, that's pretty helpful. So you can see, so yeah, and their plans are rough, but essentially our thought was tying in a flat roof just below that curve above where those doors walk out onto it, and not coming all the way to the knee wall and leaving a porch so we're not affecting the facade from Water Street too much. And I have actually printed the Google Street View of that, showing that if you do leave it back at least 8 feet, you really can't see it much from Water Street, just because of that large offset on the first floor. And then, yeah, in the other document, I took some images just to show. So that's from the rear parking lot. The main place you would see it from is that side, and that put the parking lot behind it. But from the front, you don't see it a lot.
Is there any reason why you don't want to come up to the street?
Mostly in the, we looked at the past approvals, and it looked like there was some comments on not encroaching on the street. We had, from the original approval in 2007, there was, again, this is all very preliminary. I think the owners like the idea of some sort of porch structure, although it could be roofed in to tie in possibly, and it may make that facade actually look better. But so essentially right now you can see the first floor, and then it steps back and it's the second floor plus that little knee wall. You can't even see the arched part.
Right, we're not
from-
seeing the third floor at all.
Exactly, yeah,
at
and
the
even
moment.
even if you brought it forward, you're not going to see it much. Even in that, I don't believe, because if you look at where those windows are, we would be significantly below that. So that's sort of, we wanted to get preliminary feedback on that direction, essentially make sure we're kind of going in a direction that we're not.
Oh, I see. That secondary facade is the
Yeah.
historic facade.
Right, exactly. And that's what we were kind of trying not to encroach on. it's a little bit of an
Did y'all
optical
send-
illusion.
Interesting.
I'm just trying to get clarity. Did y'all send us something that's marked up showing what you want to
Nothing
do?
marked up yet, because it's,
Okay.
yeah, it's
So
just,
therefore, I don't
where
know.
it's only discussion.
Exactly.
So this
That's the
wall is
historic
what you
facade.
see in the front.
Exactly.
It,
Yeah.
yeah.
So y'all want to expand the third floor to
So
that
the
point?
idea.
Not
that
even quite to there, leaving it back 8 to 10 feet.
Oh, okay.
up here.
Yes,
Okay.
just like
I
that,
had no
yeah,
idea
just
that
to
was even
not
back there.
affect the.
I guess, I mean, are we jumping right in? We don't need to.
It's a preliminary
Right,
discussion.
I think what would be helpful for us is the rendering or something.
Definitely, and
You know,
that's
what's
part-
that gonna
yeah.
look like from the
Yep.
street?
I think
and-
definitely.
Yeah, if you hold it back far enough where you can't see it from the street, I
Mhm.
don't think.
Now, you will see it from kind of behind it and beside it, but not from Water Street. But, yeah, we definitely intend to do that. I just mostly wanted to make sure there wasn't anything we weren't thinking about before we started that process.
I mean, I think holding it back is the first step, and
Mhm.
making it clearly different from the historic structure is important.
I think there's so little of the historic structure that's left, or even that we're aware is
We-
left. I mean, I see
Mhm.
it's there, but it's,
It's
I never
grown
knew that would,
over,
yeah,
for
I
sure.
never would have guessed that was how that worked.
Mhm,
If you came to us and just filled in all of the front with 3 stories, I don't think I'd have a problem.
mhm, mhm. Great.
I mean,
Yeah.
the street
Yeah.
is,
Be
you've got a
pretty tough.
5-6 story building next to it,
And that, yeah,
you know.
that's sort of our, yeah. the-
Historic.
Junk on it.
Right.
I mean, the front looks kind of ridiculous and scaled.
It's already- mhm.
3 stories would.
Yep.
include it. And addressing whatever that front was, somehow modifying it in some way.
Mhm.
So
And
is
that-
that front first floor added?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
If you go back
I
up
didn't
one
get it, so
slide,
you
it
said
actually
that.
shows what was existing and what, so the lower, well, they didn't, so that shaded in area was all existing, and this sort of barrel area is what got added, which is,
But the front part, that's the first floor level, that got added also out
So-
to the street. So really, the
it
original
got
facade was
adjusted.
straight, that straight line, right up and, all the way down the ground.
Yeah.
Got it.
In the picture, yeah, in the historic photo.
Yes.
Rick Euler, you have some comments on it?
Hey guys, Rick Euler. So Jeff provided this as well. There's some pictures of the original on this. I don't know.
And then new building was.
That had me really confused until about 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's a really strange building.
You got any desire to tear that front addition off the first
Yeah.
floor?
As of now,
Demo as proof.
but
Yeah, no, I'm gonna,
Have that or not?
yeah, we have that. That's our packet.
The whole front got added,
Right.
we don't know when.
right, yeah.
To engage the streetscape.
Yeah. Do something.
And we could discuss that with owners if there is a desire to try to improve all of that. We could certainly look at that further.
I think from my point of view, you've got a lot of free reign on this one.
Okay, great.
I don't want to speak for everyone
I
else.
agree. I mean, it still would need to meet our guidelines, of course, but I think a
Certainly.
well-considered 3-story facade there would do a lot more for the
Mhm.
district than the current addition.
Whatever, I
Tend
don't know
to
if they're
agree with
vents
that.
or windows,
Yeah.
that upper fenestration, I'll call it, is kind of unique.
Mhm.
That could be echoed in a
Something
modern design.
brought back, yep.
You know, just give a nod to what was there.
Mhm. Sure,
I
yeah.
actually do see that on warehouses. If you look on the mall, there's
Demolition.
I think so.
Mhm.
I mean, I think they're glazed, but I have seen those in warehouses around here.
Mhm. And we could echo that with glazing for sure. Okay, well, I think that gives us what
Does
we
that
need
give you what you need?
comment-wise, yeah.
I mean, I think
It's mostly.
certainly if you don't want to, if that's more than what your program is, I think there's very little concern about an addition
Mhm.
that steps
Yeah.
back from that
I
original
think that was
facade.
the first question, and then, if, I'll go back to the owners, and if they know that there's interest in that, they may want to explore that further. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Have a good evening.
More than we hold.
We aim to please.
I'm glad Fred left, because he would not be.
One happy
Look, this is really unfair.
Somebody's happy with us. Thank you. You made us feel good.
It's, we're gonna, cling to that. That's our life preserver. I mean, but it, yeah. We're recruiting. No, it's once again to have an image up large and a group of people looking at it, because I was trying to figure out what was the original, and
Historic photo is helpful.
this is very good, very good. All right, next up is 422 2nd Street, maybe one of the more historic houses that we've looked at in a long time. And this is also and I'll pull all this up. Let me just stop sharing. This is also a preliminary discussion, and met with Tim and the owners last week or so, and understand what they're trying to do. It's very similar to, I'll say, what's going on at 747 Park Street. Is a 1930s brick addition on the rear of this house that kind of gums up the works, if you will. And then in 1996, a single-story addition was added around it. I think one of the interesting things that the owners mentioned to me when we got there is that, and it's the same thing with 123 Bollingwood, where it was that effort to kind of open up that landscape on that house, is that there's a real unique backyard to this, and the intent kind of to pull the cork off of that and allow it to be accessible from inside the house. So there's two questions. One is I think the removal of the 1930s brick addition. I don't see any issue with the frame 1996 edition. And then obviously what that rear addition would look like. And I did say to Tim that this is where an opportunity to be modern and contemporary, that this is not red bricks and white trim required on an addition like this. But so I think those are the two things I want to have you guys explore, and part of it also is our ordinance is written and Carl, I may have asked you years ago about this, about if it exceeds 25 square feet of a wall or a floor, then it's a demolition, and that measurement doesn't make sense. So does this, in fact, what's proposed on the rear rise to the level of a demolition request, or should this be evaluated as an addition from start to finish? And I think a similar set of questions I would ask also when 747 Park comes up. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Tessier, and you want me to pull some images up?
Sure, that'd be great, if you've got them. And Jeff, maybe if we could look at sheet number 3, the third page, which shows the nature of those current additions.
Everything's foggy to me. Maybe I need to go home.
It takes a minute to load.
Yeah.
And while Jeff's pulling those up, obviously this is a preliminary discussion. Our intent is not to get too far down the design path. I do want to mention that we have a landscape architect lined up to join the design effort, so we're not really showing any landscape elements or proposals at this point, just to keep that in mind. So yeah, Jeff, as you had mentioned, the intent is to open up the home to the backyard, which is full of nice trees.
Yeah.
We actually, there's an amphitheater-shaped area in the back, which we believe may have been originally tied to the Charlottesville Female Academy, which was there in the 1840s. So we really love the yard. We think it's a great asset to the house. But unfortunately, as you can see, the back of the house is fairly closed up, at least on this corner. What's interesting is the brick 1930s addition has a bathroom on the second floor, and that's it. That's up there, and it's off the stair landing. So it's compressed the ceilings of the kitchen that's underneath it. And the 1990s edition more or less runs with that low ceiling at 8 feet. Actually, the original house, the ceilings are at 9 feet 8, so it feels really nice and spacious until you sort of tunnel your way back into the additions. So what we'd really like to do is remove those additions. You can also see in this image how the brick 1930s addition ran right next to the windows that are part of the 1840s house, so the shutters don't even sit flat against that facade. So that's essentially what we're doing today. We do have a suggested footprint that we more or less like sign off on that so that we can keep moving forward with the design. I mean, whether or not the final version we submit in the future matches that exact footprint, I can't say, but that would more or less be where we'd like to put it. And then I'll add one more comment, which is you'll notice the 1950s garage and the proposed plans a little further back, proposed site plan. We would like to, it has 2 pairs of double doors facing 3rd Street. Otherwise, it's just a brick box on the other 3 sides. We are investigating options to open up the sides of that, facing both the house or possibly even the front yard, as possibly even like a garden pavilion or something of that nature. We don't have a design yet, but we'd like to get some commentary on modifying what's there.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Any questions or any thoughts, concerns?
So would you be taking the garage out of the garage, basically, and just turning it into a pavilion, or?
Yeah, there's no programmatic need for a garage. The owners don't need that to be a garage, so we'd rather put it to a better, higher use instead of putting cars in there. We really want to enjoy the landscape and the yard. In fact, there's a fence on the right-hand side of that driveway, which we're more than likely going to remove and place on the other side of the drive, so that when you're in that space, as you see in the top middle photo, it just feels like you're part of the landscape.
I had a question.
Mhm.
The inside corner between the 1840s and the 1930s, on the, I don't see it in the photos, but is there like a basement entrance tucked in there?
There is a half-level, low-ceiling kind of entrance to get you in an unfinished space,
Okay.
basically, under the 1930s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was.
There's a small
someone was
door.
reading is like a porch, and then I was.
And are you asking about the existing conditions?
Well, I started with the existing now. but-
Yes, there is a little well down there that you kind of drop into and then go into the.
So for your proposed, is that you're still going down, or are you proposing a porch?
We
to
would
get up?
we would scrub that entry to the basement more than likely and make a nicer entry as a part of the additions that we're doing, and possibly more than likely as part of the experience of coming out into the landscape.
I guess.
At the moment, the stair you see in the proposed
Yes.
plan is getting you from the garage level up. It's basically a half story
to the
up.
first floor level.
To the first floor.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the idea there is there's a real lack of a place to put boots and keys and any sort of gear that you have as you come in. So I think you know that would be your main entrance, back entrance into the main level of the home.
Have you looked into how tied in the 1930s edition is? It's not toothed into the 1840s, so
It's not.
it
Yeah.
could come off somewhat
Pretty easily, yeah. There's evidence, I mean, this is a sidebar, but there's evidence of, if you look at the Sanborns, on the corner of the house, there was an addition there for quite a while, and that you can see evidence today of where that was taken off.
Yeah, Tyler picked up on kind of where my concern was going, which is to just, even though the addition's gonna essentially kind of cover up the same amount of wall,
Mhm.
just respecting the historic fabric of the 1840s house and making proper repairs, also trying to avoid punching new holes through that wall. I mean, granted, they would become interior, which is outside our purview, but
Mhm.
at least momentarily, when you tear the addition off, they're not interior. Just being respectful of the original
Sure.
footprint and fenestration of the 1840s house would be appreciated.
I think our intent is that the connector or hyphen between the block that you see and the 1840s would more or less be a glassy sort of connection that's actually stepping back from where you see it today, to give it some breathing room, those windows.
Yeah, it seems like the move to inset it a little bit from the current addition, the 1930 addition, makes sense. That
Mhm.
you're showing the original shape of the house more than is currently hidden with the 1930 addition.
Maybe break this out. Any concerns with the demolition of the back structure?
I have no concerns, but to answer Jeff's question, I think in the past, we did actually look at that as a separate demolition. To me, that doesn't make any sense, but that's what we did.
I agree. I think it is, would be consistent for us to consider it as a demolition. Any concerns with the volumes or the plan that's being proposed? Nope.
To answer your first question, just by nature, I'm not a huge fan of demolition on close to 100-year-old additions, but I need to learn to pick and choose, I suppose. But to your second question, in terms of the massing of the new proposed addition, I guess and I understand the ceiling height is a desire. The roof line of the rear addition kind of being up at the same roof line level of the historic house troubles me a little bit. Like, it is the back of the house though, so. And I like the fact that the hyphen steps in under the cornice of the original house. So that's good. I think we'd be able to work our way through design elements to get to a good
Sure.
solution.
Just curious, what kind of materiality, you talked about the glass and the hyphen.
Sure. Yeah, we want to do something modern for the addition. Materials that would be compatible with what's there, obviously, and something related to being in Virginia, not something imported from like Seattle or something else like that. So we really kind of paused on internal discussions about that until we could just get this far. But we're excited about doing something that's distinct but compatible with what's there. I don't know if that's kind of a generic response, but.
I think that's a good response, because I was gonna say although this is the back of the house, it does face a street.
Mhm.
So, while contemporary, I think makes a lot of sense, just doing something that isn't completely completely crazy.
Right.
Is probably a good idea.
Mhm.
So, something that fits with the house, but is still contemporary would be.
Right.
Make a lot of sense.
I'll say, standing in the backyard, you very much get the sense that that brick addition is kind of, the house doesn't want it there. I mean, it really just, it encroaches on the house, and I don't know, what were the words we were saying, is like, it almost needs to be relieved of that thing. It's sort of, it just, I don't know, kind of gums up the work. And so, I know it's old, James, but I'll tell you, it just
Yeah, I mean,
sort of.
they clearly squeezed it in between
Yeah.
those windows.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cornice they copied off the original, and it actually runs, I think, almost into the window trim.
Looks like
It's just,
They needed a bathroom.
it met the needs of what they were doing at the time, but not in a gracious way, we don't believe.
Any concerns with the potential insertion of the glazing or windows in the 50s garage?
No.
No? Okay. Well, I think, if there's any other questions you have, certainly we can address them, but maybe we've given you what you need.
I think that's really what we need at the moment, and then we'll get into some more detail. Do you mind if I ask the homeowners?
Sure, no,
here?
please do. While you're asking, I'll just say I was able to meet with Tim and the owners on site, so very close to several of our homes, and I was just glad to just learn a little bit more about this incredible house and property. It is a real amazing piece, and a lot of interesting stories to be untangled during these during this process. But it's I hope it's worth it'll be worth the effort, I'm sure.
I have one last question. Are y'all proposing to do any restoration work on the 1840s portion of the house?
Yes, it's in need of maintenance and just repairs. So the intent is to more or less fix what's there, but not to make any major modifications. Yeah.
So no window replacements?
No.
Okay.
Jeff set us Jeff set us straight on that right away.
Good long conversation.
Lay it all
Yeah.
out there.
I mean, there's a lot of,
Thank you.
there's a lot of
All I can do is
repair
maintenance. Good.
necessary. There's some spots that are, wood just hasn't survived.
Sure.
The windows do look solid, a lot of old glass. It's nice to see that. The shutters are, the more I looked at them,
Always tough.
it was, and so kind of having that conversation again about at some point figuring out, are we stuck on wood only, or are there, products that would
Yes.
be acceptable? Because it's like, yeah, maybe there's, of all the shutters there, they could make 3. But but I did tell them that, if they replace the shutters, or, installed shutters, that we review that, but there's no requirement that shutters stay on. We would like that they stay, or if they remove them, keep them. But as I said, like on my house, the shutters were removed sometime years ago. I have no idea where they were, but we don't make people install shutters. But if you're going to do it right. And as I said, I think there's a lot to this site when they get to it. I really encourage you to go. Like Breck said, this is around the corner from my house. My son used to hang out with the kid who lived here a lot, and I never, really walked around the yard, and it really is amazing, the features there. So I'm very excited to have this family in North Downtown with us. So, anything else we can help you with?
And that's it for tonight. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So,
Wow,
thank you all. Wow,
we're done.
right on schedule.
Already there, Belmont Bridge.
Schedule? We're half an hour into the game.
No, we're at,
7:20.
But we did Belmont, right?
yeah, see, I'm not supposed to start my questions till 7:45, so I'm just gonna tap
See
my
that on the
fingers.
agenda.
Whoa. I just got a text from a client who is considering applying for the BAR.
Yes. See?
I'm floored. I wouldn't even have thought to.
Because-
Is it because they've been
Move to
watching the meeting
accept.
tonight?
Maybe,
That's right. We have,
except I think he, yeah, no, I think he qualified. Anyway,
it's okay,
we'll
it's
figure it
okay.
out. I think.
We'll figure, yeah, but we do, it is something
And
to,
so what's the open spot? It's owner of a business or
Or
a property within an
a
ADC?
commercial property, right, within a design control district.
Business or commercial property,
Mhm.
not a residential property.
Right. And so, all right, so I'm going to just sit here and maybe run through some things to get us.
Yeah, seriously.
I know, I was like,
It's a BAR
I
emergency.
was wondering
No,
what the
we have
ba-
somebody who's interested in serving with us. Let's do everything we can not to deter them.
well, after, the series of loud booms that rolled through here, I was like, okay, what, are we the only ones left? It's, I'm getting that last piece of pizza
Oh.
then.
I didn't hear them.
Oh, it sounded like thunder. You didn't
There's
hear
a
it?
train going by.
No, it was above us.
I didn't hear anything.
So, first thing up is that it is time for
Early.
But every year we do try to, in non-COVID years. I have to repeat everything I said. In normal times, we annually, you all annually elect a new chair and vice chair or co-chair, however you wish to word it.
God, we could be really
We're that time is nigh, and so I wanted to. I think it's it's your bylaws, there's no requirement that you elect or re-elect or whatever, but this is the opportunity tonight. I would offer to do it, or you can, discuss it amongst yourselves and do it at the next meeting.
I make a motion to keep the status quo. Unless anybody is really.
I move.
Status quo people.
Yeah.
Well, you can, discuss my motion.
So to be, if this helps, so going off the board at the expiration at the end of this year, Ron Bailey, Roger, who we knew was filling Robert Edwards, and we can cycle him back on, Mr. Zemer, all three can be reappointed. Mr. Gastinger is out in 2 years. Sherry in 2025, David 2025, Tyler 2025, Carl whenever the Planning Commission decides. So, no. So there was a motion to maintain the status quo. That staff would like
I
that.
guess we should ask if anybody else would enjoy this job a lot more than we do.
We could elect Ron.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
I'm sure it
Ron
won't.
Zickett.
I'm sure it
Double
won't
our
require any standing in front of city council. Appeals coming up.
Do you guys enjoy your job? Maybe that's the question.
Maybe not after last night. It's just hard. I mean, and they're, if we think we've done a good job, then it's hard. Even if we know that what council will do, or we suspect council will do, it's still difficult to spend this much time and be earnest in your consideration and then deal with appeals and inevitable overturns of our decisions. So.
There is a level of, ear bending that we take advantage of with the two chairs, or I take advantage of. So, in all fairness, I do lean on them quite a bit more than the rest of you. And
sometimes there are fire pits and non-alcoholic beverages involved.
I still have one of your blue glasses.
Non-alcoholic?
Always. So
Yes.
is that,
On the record.
you tell me, because I'll keep moving on.
Second the motion to maintain the status quo unless there are disagreements.
Are you good with that, Breck?
Unless you don't want to be
Right. If you don't want to do
status
it, speak
quo.
up. Then we can-
I'm fine to continue.
I think Breck's a great chair, but I think we're
Is
very
there-
lucky to have him.
Do we do this annually, Jeff? Is that what you said?
Supposed to.
Do I, or am I supposed to? I'm supposed to do this annually.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want them to understand if we re-elect them, it's just for a period of 1 year as opposed to
Yep.
like
Life
4.
sentence.
No, that's fine.
Life sentence.
I'd be happy to continue. I enjoy. I do think try to bring an even-handedness to it and a calmness to it, even when it gets a little bit testy sometimes. But I would suggest though that looking ahead, knowing that I'm no longer on the board in 2 years, that next year that if we should for those continuing on, we should really think about who would like to take that position. Maybe start them even before I leave.
And for the record, I'd prefer not to. I don't mind being a vice, but I'm not, I can run a meeting, but I want to participate in meetings too. And I think you have to do, Breck has a nice balance of, appearing to be neutral and letting the conversation flow without inserting himself or directing the conversation, letting robust discussion happen. I don't have that skill to the extent he does. So I don't think I'd want to be chair. So if anybody's thinking that I'm climbing a ladder here, I'm standing right where I am.
But you're okay with where you are too. I guess
I'm
that's-
okay I'm okay, chairing maybe once or twice a year doesn't hurt too bad. Unfortunately, I might be up for appearing before council on the other appeal that we had.
2 more times at least.
The one that we've heard a lot about.
We can
And council joked about last night, saying they had already heard a lot about it.
we can We can tag team that one.
It's okay.
United Front.
Don't get your feelings hurt when we, I mean, it's just, we
No.
do our job, they do theirs.
I've,
Right, yeah.
I've told
As
everybody.
long as they don't get testy with us, we're good.
After, as long as we're discussing that, or,
Well, did you vote?
yeah,
Okay.
We do not.
Did not.
Do you want to call
Yeah.
it?
by
Do you wanna call the
proclamation.
vote?
Well, I would just want to add one thing before the discussion closes, though. It is a really important time for this board and for the city, and it really came up to me in talking with Fred about this his project before this tonight, and there are several themes that are recurring, and I think it's important for us to be articulate to the public,
heard that.
to the press,
Yeah. That was similar to the,
Sorry.
in our meetings, of course, but to the public, to the press, and really stand up for the work that we do and allow the city to really understand that this is an incredible tool towards improving our city, and maybe righting some misconceptions that there are at some points about what this board does and how we do our work.
and I think Breck, even last night, was very articulate about who we are and what we do, and to council, and as he was on the Preston Place appeal as well.
Thank you.
So you guys were called to the meeting for representing?
Jeff
the-
had
We,
us,
we attended remotely.
yeah,
Okay.
Tried to get Sherry to, I think the mayor thought Sherry was supposed to.
well, because you put both of our names on there as attendees, so Lloyd was like, does Sherry want to speak? I'm like, oh, no, I don't.
I just imagine Breck like pushing her out on the
Right.
stage.
We weren't in the same place, but he would have been texting me like, there's a squirrel, Sherry. Look at the other way.
My error.
No, it would have been redundant, just if he, for some reason, he had lost the connection, or I don't know, whatever, if I really felt like I needed to talk, but,
Well, it was a bit odd that I wasn't there when that vote happened, so if there were any questions, it was
Okay.
really helpful that.
I think
that
I would
Sherry was there.
go, maybe on the next one. Jeff, do we know when it's happening, the church?
I'm gonna mention that in a minute.
I might go in person.
I think
I think
and I
or
think
both
I
of
should go
us,
too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To
definitely
prevent
have
me
a.
from like throttling. No, I'm kidding. But I think it is good. I think it's good that they hear, even if they vote to overturn. I think it's good that they hear.
Absolutely.
And what we did this evening with that motion sure helps.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a one-line item.
Yeah, it just
and-
sounds like, oh no, we were just had a bad night and we denied another demolition. I mean,
Yeah.
Their questions to me, even though they were only a few, really indicated that they had looked
Already-
at and listened. So
Right,
I
they
was pleased with that. Their familiarity with
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
The sacrificial shed.
All right, motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? I'll abstain.
I'm seeing
the
you.
status quo passes. So also I wanted to mention tonight, 5 years now, it's been.
What?
What?
Flies.
No
Isn't that
way.
amazing? I'm just, and I
You
feel-
can't have this newbie excuse
I know.
anymore, man.
Oh, they-
You've been
believe me.
flying that flag for way too long.
Yeah, the ladies up front do not do it. Oh, we don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. It has been, it's been a pleasure. It's been a trial. Molly's full-time replacement starts in a couple of weeks, so she will then be able to transition to sort of fully assisting me, and it's been, the last couple of weeks have been rough. Preparing these appeals they're not simple, and it's a lot of time, and preparing staff reports for entrance corridor take, probably a good 40, 80 hours, so it's an extensive amount of work. And so we had an opportunity for the church to bring those forward at the same time, but I just couldn't get the staff report done. I'm aiming for March 20th, we will see. But I think I've been, like you all, expressing out in the community, this is the box within the BAR operates, and this is the box within which council can operate, and they are not at odds. They are, this is not a, I'm repeating myself, but I said to the council last night, an appeal should not be seen as a rebuke of the BAR. It's a continuation of a process as designed. So the next thing I had in here, and it goes to.
I would also say,
Yes.
could I just interrupt? When you said that, I almost, just listening to it, I almost felt like you were saying that the outcome of them overturning us was part of the process and it was going to be inevitable. So you may want to just tweak
I
those
know,
words
and
a
I
little bit.
felt that as soon as
That's how I,
it-
I felt like you were almost saying, we know you're going to overturn it. We we won't take this personally.
And it's a
and-
very, you're absolutely right. As soon as I said it, it's like, oh, I know how that sounds on Channel 10.
But I agreed with what you were saying,
Yeah.
that we shouldn't take, they have a different purview, and I got what you were saying, but the way it came out, I thought, oh my gosh, this is like, do
Yeah.
what you will, we won't hold it against you.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. And so the other piece is that, so we had a lengthy meeting last week with the planning commission, and when they're looking at entrance corridor, they have the entrance corridor review board. And after that meeting, a comment was made, not by anyone on the committee, but someone associated with the applicant said, I hear your staff reports are getting really long, what's going on? And then they said, I love them. And I said, well, I heard it and I understood that, and I know, because Breck and I have talked about, you all only have so much time to read and look at this. So I just wanted to tell you that what I'm trying to work towards is that on page 1 and page 2 is what you need to know. It's not always, and then, that the suggested motion is right there, but really that if you could only read one thing, it's those first 2 pages.
This was terrific.
I know the picture in the map takes up space and unnecessary, but it helps me visually, just to go, oh, I know, it helps me remember what project I'm looking at. That's
Yeah, it helps us too.
okay, good, a device for me.
Yeah.
I can probably move the prior actions more to the end. I'm always torn, because I remember the conversation Breck and I had a year ago about the importance of using the staff reports and the presentations to let people know about these sites. I mean, really, probably, I don't remember which one it was that Robert did, and you were like, wow, it's so cool to hear about the site. And I feel like sometimes I rush through because I want to, I know everybody wants to keep going. So you don't have to answer tonight, but if you have any input or what's a good way to communicate history, because that's what we do have an opportunity here to do, is say, here's this building, here's its story. The other piece is that, and I've started doing this last couple of years, when we have a preliminary discussion, if nothing else, it gets my staff report ready. And I try to treat it the same way, and I try to just again, keep putting in there, helps the applicant. Do you all, I don't have to do them, but are they helpful at all, or is that just more stuff?
Personally, I think you and Molly are so busy that if somebody doesn't formally submit something,
Okay.
I don't think they should get the benefit of you working.
That's,
They get our time on the agenda, they can email us, you can put anything up, but kind of feel like I don't know.
that's how I'm kind of approaching it, is if I've got time, I'll do it, but it's not a requirement, as you all see. It's helpful, but it's not necessary, and that's very helpful.
The only other comment I have, not about the staff report itself, but just the length of our package, and I know we don't print it out anymore, but it just still is a lot to go through. I wish we could just persuade applicants not to give us, and I know Carl is about to contradict me as soon as this is out of my mouth, but I have to say it.
Cage match.
Any views of interior? We got one this evening. I know it was
I
not,
meant-
yeah.
yeah.
Or even floor plans, to the extent that they don't really relate to stuff that is gonna be altered on the outside. Okay.
I do wanna see like if there's I do wanna see a floor plan that at least shows the outer perimeter.
Correct.
So I
Of
can
a new,
understand the building.
And
like
that's-
of an addition or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Th-
Yeah.
That's one of
But we
my,
can walk out the
yeah.
inside.
Yeah.
That's one of my broken record
Okay, good.
things that
Thank
I tell
you.
people. Don't put on there, little Susie's room, that, just room one. I
Right.
urge people to remove the private information.
But I
I-
do think, like I mentioned earlier on the last preliminary discussion, like, for historic buildings, it's important to understand the fenestration.
Right.
And
Right.
especially where that's been encapsulated by an addition.
And,
That little tidbit's
yeah,
important.
and with the Childers house, I had asked them and we just crossed wires and I didn't get another set. And I thought about deleting the PDF, but then at me altering the submittal but yes, and I try to do that. I try to limit that. We have a couple applicants who, the thing that you all looked at the other night, Carl, was 78 pages. And so it's,
At
sometimes
some
it's.
point, I'm just thumbing through.
I know.
Like it's
And
not.
so-
I'll just
Yeah.
feedback, something I've found very helpful that you've done for us is when we have an application that, we see like 4 or 5 times, like, for example, the apartment beside the Wharton Baker house. It was really helpful when you said, like, okay, here's what they showed us
Oh my
in
God,
October,
yes.
here's what they showed us in
That was the
December,
best.
here's what they showed us in March, like, super helpful. So-
And you should make them do that.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
If, I know they don't
But
always.
if you
know.
simplify it to where it's,
Yeah.
you're able to kind of say, this is the shot that captures the essence of it. We don't need to see their whole application again. It's sort of, here's the 1 or 2 pictures from October or
Right.
whatever it was, to click in our mind, like,
Almost-
oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
Well, that was awesome. I wish we'd had it on the West Main one that we saw over and over and over again with Jeff Dreyfus. Only because it changed, that facade changed a lot.
That is the nice part about you doing it, is because it's not selective.
Right.
Yeah,
Correct.
I agree that, yeah, I
I would
agree.
have liked to see that.
It's, be-
Even though it was sort of beyond the point of doing anything about it.
yeah.
I think
Well,
Dave wanted to see the whole Belmont Bridge progress.
No.
All about it.
Back to the drawing board.
Yeah, thank you, and I.
He's having a heart attack.
And the key thing, I know, and I get internally, my bosses say, you don't need to do that, the applicant needs to do that. And I say, but I need to look at these. And that exercise of me comparing them, instead of just going, here BAR. And it's the same thing when I do those, where I'll take the photos of the neighborhood and say, hey, here's how they compare. That's me viewing that and seeing that and understanding that and not just sort of passing it on. So I agree. I wish some applicants could do more. Sometimes it takes more explaining to them how to do more. I guess I tend to be more helpful than I should be, but if there's things that you all don't need, you can always tell me. I know one of the reasons I include sections of the design guidelines, and I take out the introductory paragraph. I try to only use what are the criteria that you're looking at. Melanie was always on me because I would say, well, you guys can look them up. She'd say, well, someone that's at home or just looking at a staff report, they need that information. So it's
that's
there
what- yeah.
if you need it. We have the links if you need it. I know that Mary Joy used to go to the extent of she would highlight what she thought were the criteria, and I reached the conclusion that there were still things that you all, don't rely on me to tell you what to look at, because you'll see stuff too. All right, the other thing
Okay,
is.
wait a minute, one more.
Yes, ma'am.
I still, and I've done this before, but I'll say it in front of everybody, I still would encourage you to give us a recommendation from staff. It's not required, but where you feel like you would like us to take action and you feel strongly about it, you're the expert, you are a preservation planner. Mary Joy did it for every application
Really?
I ever,
Okay.
absolutely, she never did not have, I cannot remember where she was ever ambivalent. I mean, there might have been times, I just don't recall them. She always had a recommendation. And she,
In the
and
public staff
I think
report?
any professional also, if we all got together and Mary Joy had this recommendation, everybody else was going in the other direction, she's a professional, you would be fine with it too. And she was gracious about it. It never created friction or anything between us, but it often just gave us a start for consideration. So I,
I-
since you're at your 5-year mark, you're now officially in kindergarten.
I am, but I
Well,
will.
You can start to do that.
I will say, I do think that the reports do that. But I think it's a little bit in, coded language.
Right.
It's, if he's recommending support, that's very clear. And if he has questions, he won't say that. And he'll say, you should look at this and this and this.
Right.
And,
Right. I
and he
agree.
leaves it open. The reason why I mention that is that Jeff does fill a difficult role in having to maintain a relationship with these applicants throughout the process, and probably wants to be received as a impartial arbiter in some ways, and so that recommendation can be difficult at times.
I'll tell people I'm the navigator, or the cruise director, or whatever. I'm trying, I want to, and I do, tell every applicant, I've been through this, I've gone to the BAR. And so just to be comfortable with it, I do, when I get things that I think are just not going to fly, I will tell people. So sometimes that's already occurred, and then we're kind of over that, and then it's like, all right, well, I'll let the BAR speak. There are some times I'm not comfortable making a recommendation. There are some architectural determinations that I just am not, I don't want to say not qualified for, but I think that you all are more qualified collectively. So, yeah, Breck, you're right. Sometimes I veil things, and I'm like going, oh, I hope they saw that. But Sherry, I appreciate what you're saying, and I need to
I
be.
think both work,
Yeah.
I do
telling
think
us subtly or telling us obviously.
if we have if we disagree with Jeff's recommendation and then it goes to an appeal, I do think that becomes a weaker position for us. So, in a sense, Jeff being more neutral, I think, is beneficial to the process.
Let's just not talk about appeals anymore.
Yeah.
Let's presume
Sorry.
there aren't going to be any instead of planning for them.
The
sorry.
planning commission had done this at times. They'll say, well, why do you want this? Why are you making them do that? And I'm like, I'm not making anybody do anything. And I think the last one, I took, 20 pages of the guidelines, and I tried to answer every single one. I don't know if everybody read it, but I was figuring, I'm gonna cover the bases. No way I'm gonna do that for the BAR, but I will try to. I think.
You got us through in one meeting, so we did do a gigantic building in
Yeah.
one meeting.
I think I need to, and
3 hours of meeting, but.
well, I wasn't that long, but I want to do a better job of having that preliminary discussion with the chairs. Where are we going? What's coming up with this one? And I think when we've had some difficult projects, you all have been very open to that. I appreciate it. All right, the last couple things I wanted to, I mentioned earlier about the COA appeal, that timeline, so we got that covered. It's just something, I want to make sure when we say you got your COA, you got approval for the COA, it's finalized if no one appeals it. I had a question that I'm going to put up on the screen here because and this is possibly to more
Halftime.
you all with the collective.
28-21 halftime. Virginia's losing.
I'm sorry.
Or we're resetting. Not resetting.
Scouting.
We'll come out.
I like one more behind that. It just seems
We
like.
usually are.
Yeah. I always get worried when we're ahead.
I get worried when we're 10 minutes ahead.
Oh, yeah, that one is.
So frustrating.
There's nothing to show here.
Your screen is locked. You can share. Stop share. Share. All right, so this is a,
Historic artifact.
We got an email about this.
yeah, you did.
Is this the Altamont Circle or whatever?
Jeff, you're muted.
This is over where
From the
you know
back.
what?
Thank you, Remy.
Those are
I
words
love
no one
that.
ever says. So, yeah, this is over where Robert used to live, boo. But it's, the trash cans are in the front yard, and this is a rental. And so the solution, the owner decided to just box in the trash cans. I've got to clear with zoning whether this is a structure and whether it can be constructed in the front yard and it's not a fence. So there's some, but
Why are we learning about this?
well, because I had to contact them and said, this is not right. But I wanted to just share with you, like, this is where we're sort of, we would say, all right, what are the other fences in the neighborhood? Really aren't any, other than I would say, you can't have bare wood. So I'm going to determine,
Utility enclosure.
Is there not, like, isn't there something where you're not supposed to keep trash cans in the front yard?
well, that's where, I think there's a zoning thing on that, so yeah, and I will take care of that, but
One of those big fake rocks to cover up, like they do with the telephone, the communication pedestals.
absolutely, and so.
Would that be okay?
I don't, this is one where I'm going, all right, maybe back, Carl will go, yeah, I remember back in 2016, we had something like this. So I'm just really kind of throwing a line here and seeing if you pull on it, but that's okay. I will bring it back. The other thing,
I'm confused why there's no cans behind the fence in the picture.
There's like one.
They're there,
It
they're
doesn't
just,
look like
yeah.
it's big enough to cover up those 4 cans.
Where are the cans at that moment, if they're not always out at the street?
Did somebody send this to you, Jeff?
They're always there. It's a rental. It's a,
It's 2 trash and 2 recycling, so the rental's
two
probably,
units.
it's a duplex or something, but we should just pull them up on the porch or hide them behind the bushes.
it should go, right. And so now, the other thing I did want to share is,
Did somebody send that to you, or is that, how did you get alerted to that?
My neighbor's
Jeff
fussing
walks
over
around
it.
and looks for.
and when I'm killing time, I go out and, no, I don't really, I don't have, it was brought to my attention, but,
By a neighbor?
You need to send Mr. Fabio down there.
yeah. So I wanted to,
Did they find him or not?
getting there. So this is just a quick update. David and Tyler, I know this is the Levy Opera House. This is the 1980s edition. This is Redlands Club, formerly been the site of the Swan Tavern. Over here this is an 1890s house, and there was a twin house right here, we know. When they came in for the demolition request for the 1980s edition, the BAR requested archaeological investigation. We didn't think it was going to happen, and it's kind of, and I know because I've talked to several of you about it, and thought I would just give you an update. It really is, it's pretty, all right, let's see if I go to the next page. It's pretty amazing. So just let me flick through this. So this is an 1823 insurance policy for Swan Tavern. And so this is Jefferson Street, Park Street here. And these aren't to scale, but used them at least spatially proximate to what we had and was there. So there's the tavern, a structure to the back, then further was a kitchen, and then further back was a stable or a barn. I just kind of took this and laid it. Again, this isn't, this not to scale, but just to kind of reference you to where things might be. So again, the addition, Levy addition, Redlands Club, and so you all have seen. This is the first couple nights. This is between Redlands Club, Levy Opera House here, and in the middle here was where that mysterious half circle was, and the determination it was 20th century, so it wasn't as odd as we thought.
What was it?
Not sure exactly, but it wasn't old. But the excitement on the site is pretty wild. So what you see, in fact, there's that semicircle there. So
Parking curb, yeah.
a what?
A parking curb?
It literally looks like rocks that you and I stacked in our backyard. So this is Redlands Club, was built 1832. Swan Tavern located that site and actually faced Jefferson Street. It burned down in 1828. And if you recall, there was a little, one of the little rooms behind Redlands Club would be located roughly there. And Carl, you had asked me the other night, like, what kind of things are they seeing where all those flags are? A lot of post holes, so you can see kind of, there's a pen there to give you a sense of scale. So a lot of places where posts were in the ground. And I asked Nick Bonharper, the archaeologist working with Ben, I said, how can those holes be so square? I've never dug a square hole. And he said, that's the very bottom of the hole where the post is kind of set down in, and that's why it has that very regular shape. So there, you little archaeology 101 for you. So there's a lot of things like this there that you see with the flags on it, and that's what they've been mapping, and then they're going to, try to determine where they are. This is where, so this is that, there's Redlands Club, and remember I said there was that one building behind it, and so they found this brick floor, and that's that thing right there. And
What's the insurance map say that is?
What's that?
Does the insurance map say what that is?
I can't read it.
Is this Swan Tavern?
It is Swan Tavern, yes.
I mean, it's the floor of Swan Tavern?
No, the Swan Tavern's here. I think that floor looks like this thing right here. And so, but just to
Screened-in porch on Swan Tavern.
it is, it's, I think it said it's the first outdoor cafe space, but, so, but this is the kind of, and it may not be clear, but you can see, so this is where those bricks were, and you can see the discoloration. And this is what, the archaeologists are looking for. There's something different there. And while this is a large space, if this were 5 feet long and 30 inches wide, you would immediately think grave. But that's where, when we talk about, when you scrape back the soil, you can see a grave shaft. This is not. This is just the base of that brick floor. But it's that variation that where they're trying to get down to that undisturbed soil and say, all right, what do we see? And I still haven't gotten to really good stuff yet. So
When did that get uncovered?
That's what I was throwing rocks at your window the other day to try to get you to come out.
I haven't seen this for.
So,
Is that the 1890s house?
this is, let me get oriented. So this is looking north, like across High Street, and then this is looking south across Jefferson Street. So what you see here is, that thing right there is that thing right there. So this is the foundation of the 1890s house. Exactly where we thought it would be. In fact, when they were doing the work, I was like, I didn't think we needed to dig there. But there's something else in this photo that you guys are always so sharp and eagle-eyed. I wonder if you see it in this photo. So, let me get my mouse to work. Yeah, so right there.
Right where?
Yeah, point to it, James, and go up. It's at an angle. It's canted. It's
Is it the stable?
They don't know, but it's at like a 30-degree angle from the street, but you can clearly see it. If you walk out there, it's like, oh my gosh.
Across the street this morning.
And it's, this appears to be a cellar space. And there are things that are sort of finding in it that are.
How deep are they going down?
They don't know how they don't know how much further this goes, but there's a lot of material in here that's,
Predates the 1890s house, right? The 1890s cuts through it.
it's late, 1700s, mid to late 1700s. So this is kind of been a game changer in the sense that now there's, a need to, what is this? And I have other than that 1828 insurance map,
I'd never known this battery to be occupied by anything other than Levy Building and Swan Tavern. So this was really a big deal. It's gonna be interesting to see. I think to keep the budget down, they're looking for volunteers to help dig next week. And having.
No, archaeology
build
majors
out
at
there.
UVA.
I tell you, when you do this for 8 hours, moving that dirt, man, it's
Good exercise.
So it's
When did they tear, do they know when they tore that house down? That 1820?
it was knocked down when they built the addition, and so I just let me see if I have it. Yeah, so what I did was, again, going back to that structure,
What does it say in the?
it says stables. So this says not less than 30 feet, so that was sort of in 1828, that was your,
I see it says more than 30 feet.
I think it's
Yeah.
More than 30 feet.
is more than, right, so it's not closer, it's more than 30 feet apart, which was
Right,
their,
for insurance,
right.
like,
And so,
The next one won't burn down the next one.
right, so it is interesting,
What does it say, stable?
um,
What does it say?
I'll,
40 feet
Who found, did you find this or did Ben?
not Ben found all this stuff. These guys know where to, it's amazing what they come up with. So,
So now that they've uncovered this foundation, what are they gonna do with it?
the foundation is really, it's meaningless, it's not,
It's gonna go away 'cause they're gonna
I mean, we knew it was
build
there.
there.
It's that,
So they're gonna
it's
demo
that
it.
discoloration that's really the curiosity.
Document it first and then demo it is what they're
It'll
doing.
get documented.
with
Oh,
this
yeah,
Highway
it's
and the
documented. It's,
Archaeology report, right?
and it's, but it trying to determine what, I mean, there's a story to tell, if there's a lot of fill in there, and, so stay tuned. And then, but I will say that Virginia clay sticks to you. Molly and I tracked it all over City Hall. It's amazing. And then, of course, the last picture is that just
That's where
like-
you want to find the body, right?
it's where it's where it probably is, given the record. I've been laughing that it's my luck and it's probably over here underneath the parking lot at Redlands Club. But now knowing that the Swan Tavern went all the way, almost, it was, and Ben and Nick were saying that this was probably the public road. This may have been three-notched road, and the tavern facing the street. And now the report says that Jewett was buried behind Swan Tavern, which would have been here, except we know that in the 1950s, the family that lived here talked about the grave reportedly being in the backyard. Now, that may have been anecdotal. They may have simply said, oh, yeah, it's behind Swan Tavern, and therefore it's there. So they haven't found anything indicative of a grave here, unless it's that
They're taking up
large
this
area.
They're demoing the curve and the median, right?
We're,
Right in the foreground, right here on Jefferson, or that.
this is
In
all,
addition to the parking lot.
yes, all of that's being, gone and redone. It's all part of the plan. I can't remember what the,
Over there.
but it's possible. And then remember there's also the report of a well that somebody was thrown down. So,
Was thrown down the well?
Yeah.
mhm.
Wait,
Question is whether he was dead before or not.
No, it wasn't Jewett. It was another guy. And apparently Jewett was away when the guy was thrown in the well.
wait,
A murder. It was a murder. And the body was thrown in the well behind Swan Tavern. So,
At least they thought he was dead.
yeah,
I hadn't heard that one.
he wasn't a very good swimmer. And so so they're going to
I
be,
wonder if he did a swan dive.
They found a-
but-um-bum. So that's where we are. It's
They found a
it
privy yet?
huh?
A privy?
I mean, they're no, it's okay. It's really the
Well, we still have to talk about cafe lights, so.
no. I scrubbed it. I'm just building adventure and intention and all that. So
you know, this is where they cleared, and it doesn't show, but all those orange flags were like where posts were, different things were. They've mapped those, and they're trying to see, do they align with anything, do they suggest anything? So, but it, you know, I say, it's great, walk by, take a look, just don't walk in that mud, because it doesn't come off. And so I just wanted to share that. I think it's pretty cool stuff. I'm glad you all, Ben was really psyched this morning. He goes, this is an extraordinary find. This is really, you know, he said, of this age, in this location, right here, he said, this is extraordinary. So I think it's pretty cool to be part of that, and I think you all, so glad you know, pushed for it.
Do you have any idea what that discoloration might be?
Mm-hmm. So, well, it's just where, so what, this clay you see is undisturbed. And so they go down to like the last razor, you know, and scrape everything off, and then where something's different, where it's fill, you dig a grave and throw dirt back in it, you're going to get that discoloration. And so that's, yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
So
All right.
it was part of the reason why I asked the question, and still might be worth picking at, but we did not recommend to City Council that an archaeological survey happen on the site of the stone house, but given its proximity to the university, that's why I was curious if there would have been any other reason to investigate that site further before it's.
Yeah. I know it was asked at Wurtland. This is a rather extensive evaluation. Typically, it's more of a shovel test pits and thing. This is rather thorough. But we don't have, I know Mary Joy had added that to my list, like get an archaeological, we are enabled by state legislation to require archaeological investigations, but we don't have an ordinance that requires it. Maybe, we're doing a zoning update. Maybe we could. So, pretty cool stuff. Any questions about this? And then, James, you said there's something on Chancellor coming in, or
Madison.
University Circle?
Madison.
Is that anything, is it substantive or just a project?
It's just a project.
Okay. And then I know that the mall committee is meeting next week.
March 2nd is the first meeting.
And thank you all for your time. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to turn this off. You can.
Thank
I've
you
got
all.
a general question.
Yes, sir.
We get a lot of emails, some of which, like.
Thank you.
Does all those get answered? Like an email about, does my house fit in the historic conservation district? Or like the email about the melting pot sign, like that's not our purview, but.
One, I would say, get a separate email, Gmail, say, I'm on the BAR at Gmail, so that those things go there. For whatever reason, when the city redid the webpage a couple years ago, it removed the staff directory and then created these general,
Because there wasn't gonna be any, they knew there were not gonna be any stuff.
I know, it's like, right, it's like there aren't any anyway, what are you, but, and then they created these, like, general question things, but, it goes, I mean, city council gets things, and they come to me and say, hey, Jeff, this guy wants to know how much for a sign permit, we think it could be done better and in a way that says, if you have questions about this is, here, contact, and it'll be an email that comes to just Molly and I. The concern is that if someone sends something to the BAR, they want to know that it went to the BAR, even if it doesn't need to go to the BAR. And that's something we're trying to figure out. But I would say, if you need to see it, if you need to respond to it, I will let you know. If you want to respond to it, you can.
Answering it.
But if someone says, for example, Nancy Hausman wanted someone from the BAR.
Sandy. It's Sandy Houseman, not Nancy.
That's it, Nancy.
Yes. It's okay.
She does great stuff, but,
I think it's a
I really
man.
left that to Brett. If you want to respond, good. You can, if you get, so as far as if someone ever asks you something, you wish to engage them, that's entirely up to you. Sometimes the easiest thing is to go into the channel 10 and say, here's the link to the meeting, you can watch it.
it's something you want to ignore it. I read them all, and I do try to respond to the ones we need to respond to. But it's, I don't know why you all are answering people's questions of, hey, I'm thinking about buying a house. Would you guys let me tear it down? What do you think? And you don't, so.
I just wanted to make
Oh, we
sure those
know.
weren't all going into a black hole, so I'm glad,
Nah, they're
glad
not, but I
there is
don't-
an answer to those questions.
But as far as you all responding,
We presume that Jeff and Molly are handling them.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you
And,
for asking.
I got 60 emails that are working on it. And like we're supposed to not let them until I answer them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You got, I'm sorry, you got what?
I had 60 emails with questions.
60?
I just like, I
With
can't.
questions?
Just VAR questions, what does this mean, why are you that? Why won't the VAR let the church have solar panels?
Oh.
Yeah, that's.
No, just stuff, just.
After we got mold with that, I called Bill Owens and I said, Bill, to the extent that you could tell the applicant, he's clearly gonna appeal this. Bill told me he knew that they were gonna deny it. He told me that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he said that to me on the phone, and I told a reporter that. But I said, hey, Bill, you know, if this is going to city council, the church has already appealed, why don't you tell these people, I mean, they can harangue us, that's fine, we're here, we'll take it, but it would be so much more productive if they would email council@charlottesville.org and tell their counselors, because those people are gonna make the decision, and then all of a sudden, we got no more emails. Did you notice that? I mean, I should have told you the time, but we got 0 more. I mean,
I think
I don't,
it's a lesson in people understanding the process.
right.
Well, it
You
didn't
know.
help that the Daily Progress article was exactly like one sentence long. BAR denies solar panels on church, and I think that was the extent of it.
Yeah, but then Hawes Spencer wrote a longer one that was
Yeah.
pretty balanced.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked to Boss. which is-
Yeah, and I did too, and I told him, yeah.
Okay, we did pretty good tonight. Let's not spoil it.
Breck has his hat on.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, stand up.
All in favor,
Aye.
leave the
Aye.
building. If you're opposed, you can stay.